Yun-woo was soundlessly rushing in the forest, hotly pursuing her target like a leopard. The assassin sensed the danger behind him and instantly hid himself into a big tree with dense foliage. He was definitely a master of camouflage and he did it without making any sounds. Common people could never detect him. Yun-woo, who had been locating the target with spiritual power, sensed that he had stopped. The corner of her lips curved up into a cold smile. With a sudden move of her body, she disappeared into the top of the tree and slowly closed in on the target. "Are you waiting for me?" As if uttered by a phantom, her voice was heard from behind him. Before that assassin could react, Yun-woo's blade slid through his neck with a whooshing sound. The cut was very deep. Eyes dilated, the assassin's body fell down soundlessly. After giving a cold glance at that assassin, Yun-woo enwrapped herself with wind element and instantly disappeared into the forest in another direction. A night breeze passed by. Somewhere in the dark forest. After a cold gleam of the sword, with dilated eyes, another assassin watched Yun-woo, who had just cut his neck, his eyes full of horror. When did she find my position? In the same way, like a ghost, Yun-woo had soundlessly closed in on the targets and killed them, each kill taking only one slash. 4 down. There was one left, that old man in black robe, who was an early stage of tier 9. Yun-woo smiled coldly. With a whooshing sound, her figure shot towards the periphery of the forest and instantly disappeared. On the periphery of the magic beasts forest. There were more low-level magic beasts as well as more humans here, which caused disturbance to her spiritual detection. Even with so much disturbance, she would still distinguish the old man's chi, which was unique to an assassin. It seemed that this old man in a black robe was not a fool. He knew he should flee to the periphery where there were more people. But his attempt to escape was doomed to failure. On the sight of that purple figure that flashed in front of him, the old man in a black robe was somewhat horrified, the hair on his back standing on end. How's this possible? He had never revealed his chi on his way. How came she still found his whereabouts? When his eyes met her purple ones, a surge of horror rose in him and before he could yelp, his soul seemed to have been immobilized. A sharp sword was laterally swung at him and cut into his throat. At this moment, both his yell and his horror were blocked in his throat. The old man in a black robe widened his eyes, staring squarely at the two eerie purple eyes. Yun-woo curved the corner of her lips into a cruel smile, coquettish and icy. She whipped out the sword, blood splattering. Blood gushed out of the wound in his neck. His eyes full of horror, his body unconsciously fell backwards. Maybe, they shouldn't have underestimated their enemies from the very beginning. They should have rushed into the cave and killed her the moment the fight started. But it was too late. Yun-woo coldly glanced at the body on the ground, her eyes full of apathy. Then she turned around and walked in Long Qingxie's direction. She had barely walked a couple of steps forward, however, when a female voice yelled from behind. "Hey, who are you? Stop!" Upon the yell, someone covered in fighting spirit rushed over. And then a female dressed in elegant clothes appeared in front of Yun-woo. Behind her, a couple of figures with powerful chi also rushed over. They were holding legendary luminous pearls in their hands, lighting up the darkness around. Yun-woo stopped. She slightly raised her eyes to the female getting in her way. She was about 20, peak stage of tier 3. The 3 men behind her were all warriors in late stage of tier 8, and they were clearly lackeys. It seemed that this female was from a noble background. "Was it you who killed that old man?" After peering at Yun-woo for a while, the female pointed at the body of the black-robed old man and asked. Yun-woo didn't answer but raised her eyebrows and glanced at her. Seeing that Yun-woo remained silent, that female couldn't help frowning. "Are you dumb? I'm asking you a question." Coldness glinted at the bottom of Yun-woo's eyes. Judging by her arrogant manner, the female must be a spoiled lady of some rich family. However, Yun-woo was not interested in playing with a lady like this. She indifferently turned around, planning to get past her and leave. Seeing this, the female was somewhat annoyed. With a sudden of her body, she blocked Yunwoo's path. You little girl, don't be so arrogant. Do you know who I am? Coldly looking at her, Yunwoo asked rhetorically in a flat manner, does your identity have anything to do with me? So you're not dumb. Then why didn't you answer my question just now? The female said coldly with a frown. Yunwoo raised her eyebrows and said idly, why should I answer you? Wouldn't I have lost face if I answered your question? Humph. You should feel greatly honored to be able to talk to me. I forgot to tell you, I'm Snow Murong, the only daughter of the Lord of Luoyang City. You're lucky to get to know me, so don't be ungrateful. However, Yunwoo was totally uninterested in her words. She went past her and slowly walked away. Snow Murong was angry and she blocked Yunwoo's path again. Were you listening to me? This time, Yunwoo also went impatient. Stop testing my patience and get out of my way. You dare to talk to me like this? Do you believe that I can make sure you never make it out of this magic beast's forest? The female's face went cold, and a ferocious, icy look appeared in her eyes. As far as she could remember, nobody had ever dared talk to her like that. Originally, she had planned to go into the depths of Magic Beast's forest to collect some medicine. She happened to pass by this area and a heavy smell of blood caught her attention, so she walked here out of curiosity. When she saw the body of the old man dressed in assassin suit as well as Yunwoo who had just left, she became curious. Of course, she naturally didn't believe that Yunwoo was the one who had killed the old man. She was just a teenage girl. How could she kill an assassin? That was a joke. She just wanted to see what this teenage girl, who dared walk alone in Magic Beast's forest at night, looked like. Unexpectedly, this teenage girl not only ignored her but also didn't show any reverence or surprise or admiration, which rather irritated her. In Luoyang, she was an exceptionally talented genius and a lot of people tried to curry favor with her. Although currently she was in Magic Beast's forest, her reputation preceded her. I can't make it out of this Magic Beast's forest. Yunwoo had heard a lot of similar words. Yunwoo gave a cold glance at this willful lady, a feeling of contempt rising in her. She wanted to kill her. But at this moment, it was Long Qingxia that Yunwoo was thinking about. She didn't know how he was, so she scorned to waste time on this spoiled lady. But she gave her an advice before leaving. Lady, here's my advice for you, make some adjustments on your vain and arrogant attitudes. Otherwise, someday you might get yourself killed without knowing how. The instant her words broke off, she covered herself with wind element and with that her figure vanished into thin air like a gust of wind. Yes. In the eyes of the four people, she seemed to have vanished. Snow Murong blinked and then blinked again. It wasn't until quite a while later that she seemed to have realized what had just happened. Her face instantly changed a little, eyes sweeping around, as if she was trying to find Yunwoo's whereabouts. Did you see how she vanished? The three men were also shocked. No, my lady. She had disappeared at a horrifyingly fast speed and they had barely sensed anything. And they were in late stage of Tier 8. If even they had failed to see anything, how powerful was that girl? At this moment, the three men couldn't help feeling frightful. If she had decided to attack their lady just now, could they have stopped her? No. They definitely couldn't have. Because that speed alone could only be matched by that of a Grand Kung Fu Master. So that girl was a Grand Kung Fu Master. Was it possible? Instantly, the three men felt their backs break out in a fine film of cold sweat. In the dark. When Yunwoo returned to the outside of the cave. Eyes open, Long Qingxia had already woken up from his qi circulation, and his crimson eyes of bloodlust had returned to their normal black color. But his handsome face was still ghastly white, and those bloody wounds all over his body were appalling. How do you feel? Yunwoo walked up to him, asking. I'll live. You finished them. Long Qingxia said casually as he raised his eyes and watched Yunwoo walking over. He sounded as if the blood on his blood-stained white clothes was not his. I got the job done. Now let me dress your wounds. Yunwoo looked at him with a frown. Upon these words, she produced a couple of medicines out of the storage space along with those silver needles. But Yunwoo had just crouched down, planning to take off his torn blood-stained clothes, when a big hand grabbed one of hers. Yunwoo raised her eyes and looked at him, saying with a frown, "Stop that. Let go of me. Let me check your wounds first." But Long Qingxie curved his pale lips into a wickedly coquettish smile. "You care about me? Does this man really want to talk about this at this moment?" But this time, Yunwoo didn't contradict him. She wanted to draw her hand back, but the man wouldn't loosen his grip, as if he would never let go of her without hearing her answer. Yunwoo couldn't help sighing secretly. She raised her purple eyes and met his deep black ones. "I do. I care about you. Are you satisfied with this answer?" Long Qingxie's lips curved in a smile which looked wickedly coquettish. "I am. I'm very satisfied." "Then would you please let me go?" Yunwoo raised her eyebrows and looked at his big hand which was gripping one of hers. Hearing her words, Long Qingxie loosened his grip as if reluctantly, but his black eyes were peering at her up and down with a fevered look in them. Under his unduly fevered gaze, Yunwoo felt uneasy, frowning. "Why are you staring at me like this? Tiny, you still haven't noticed that you've changed?" Long Qingxie raised his eyebrows and looked at her, smiling. She had changed. Changed how? Her strength changed. Nobody knew about this better than she did. However, at this time, Long Qingxie handed her a sharp, gleaming dagger, in the mirror-like blade of which she saw her features. Instantly, Yunwoo was stunned. She confusedly watched her reflection in the blade. Her exquisite features were flawless, especially her thick eyebrows and big eyes with purple pupils, as if she was a yokai. However, ignoring those purple pupils, wasn't this face exactly the same as the face she once had when she was young in modern society? How did this happen? How came that pretty face had completely metamorphosed into the face she once had when she was in modern society? Seeing that Yunwoo was astonished, Long Qingxie smiled even more wickedly. He stretched out his hand and stroked her little face. "Maybe, this is what you originally looked like. But, no matter what kind of change happens to you, you'll always be my Tiny." This was what she originally looked like. What had she originally looked like? She had thought that she had already forgotten about that. But now. However, Yunwoo soon collected herself. Without saying anything, she put away the dagger, stretched out her hands and started taking off his clothes. She planned to dress his wounds first. He was covered in blood, and his clothes were torn. She could only imagine how many wounds she would see after taking off his clothes. But after she cautiously took off his clothes, what she saw was smooth, totally intact skin. There was no wounds at all. Yunwoo was stunned. None. There was not a single wound. What's going on? At this moment, Long Qingxie suddenly stretched out his arms and dragged her into his arms. "Tiny, there seems to be something I forgot to tell you." Something he had forgotten to tell her. What was it? Yunwoo struggled out of his arms and stood up, watching him with a tight frown. There were no wounds, but there were saber cuts all over his clothes, and his white clothes had been dyed red by blood. Had he really got wounded? Seeming to have known Yunwoo was confused, Long Qingxie languidly grabbed the dagger beside him and cut his naked arm really hard. "Are you insane?" Startled, Yunwoo hurriedly yelled. But the next second, she was transfixed in shock again. The deep, bleeding cut in his arm was actually healing at a speed visible to the naked eye, and eventually, the cut healed completely without even a scar. And then, Long Qingxie continued, "Now you've seen it yourself. I have a rather special constitution. I was born with spontaneous healing power." Spontaneous healing power. Yunwoo dilated her eyes, in which a flicker of surprise flashed across. Is this man a yokai? My wounds healed, but I still lost too much blood and I'm feeble. I feel dizzy. Let me hug you. Upon this, the man affected an air of pity, stretched out his arms and dragged Yunwoo, who was still in shock, into his arms. Originally, Yunwoo had grown to have feelings for him, so she had tolerated some of his intimate behavior. If this man only played pitiful, she would have let him and tolerated his taking advantage of her, but his hands started moving downwards. Yunwoo's eyes became severe. Long Qingxie, where are your hands going? Long Qingxie slightly curved his lips, as if he had just got caught by her when his big hands were stroking her back. Surprisingly, he didn't seem to feel ashamed at all. I'm just helping you get used to it, in case you got startled when I lose control of myself some other day. Hearing his words, Yunwoo was resigned. Does this man feel uncomfortable once he stops talking dirty? Stop it. Let go of me. But I'm still dizzy. The man still wouldn't let go of this opportunity of taking advantage of her, and his hands started moving downwards. Annoyed, Yunwoo stretched out her hand and gave him a hard pinch on the thigh. Ah! Long Qingxie suddenly yelled, which startled Yunwoo. Why did you yell so loudly? She asked. And then she thought, was the pinch too hard? The man pulled a wry face when he saw how ignorant this woman was. With a torrid look in his eyes, Long Qingxie stretched out his hand and grabbed the woman's little hand that was pinching his thigh. In a low voice, he said, "You tiny little thing. You can't pinch a man's inside thigh." Inside thigh. Stunned, Yunwoo subconsciously lowered her head. When she saw that her hand, which was under his hand, was almost next to the man's that thing, her face instantly flushed scarlet. Actually she had just casually gave a pinch, and she had been paying attention to which part of him she was pinching. The torrid look on the man's face made her heart flutter. She had just meant to calm him down, but unexpectedly, what she had done ended up becoming flirting. How did things end up this way? But suddenly, Yunwoo was transfixed in shock. And then, she raised her eyes and looked at the man in surprise. You've made a breakthrough into the early stage of Grand Kung Fu Master? Wasn't he in peak stage of Tier 8? When did he break through and become a Grand Kung Fu Master? Yunwoo had accidentally sensed the power fluctuation in him, and she was absolutely astounded. Upon these words, Long Qingxie's hand, which was holding one of hers, froze briefly, but soon, he couldn't help curving his lips up and stared at her with a wicked look. How did you know? I sensed it. You sensed it? Long Qingxie raised his eyebrows, his black eyes deeper. Tiny, you never cease to surprise me. Don't try to fool me. You're such a smart girl. But even if I tell you, you might not believe it. Long Qingxie let her lie on her side against his chest, his fingers gently stroking her smooth black hair. How do you know whether I'll believe it or not if you don't tell me first? Yunwoo was not quite used to his intimate behavior, but she didn't refuse and stand up. She just let him hug her like that. After watching her in silence for a while, Long Qingxie said with a seemingly casual look, I'm a congenitally mutant warrior, born with top talents and infinite attribute, which means I can utilize 5 attributes. A mutant warrior? Born with top talents? Infinite attribute? The man had put it as if these things were no big deal, but Yunwoo was astounded. What did that mean? She believed that everybody knew the answer. No wonder at that time this man told her that it wasn't difficult for him to break through into the rank of Grand Kung Fu Master. With these endowments, it was indeed a piece of cake. This man is indeed a yokai. Seeing Yunwoo's amazed look, Long Qingxie wickedly curved his lips, stretched out his hands and stroked her little head. Stop giving me that odd look. Actually, there's downside, too. Downside? What is it? Yunwoo asked curiously. Long Qingxie seemed to have no intention of keeping it a secret from her. He lowered his eyes and looked at her. Since I'm a mutant, I can't cultivate and making breakthrough by using methods that normal people use. He can't make breakthrough by using normal methods. What does that mean? Before Yunwoo could ask, Long Qingxie continued, if I'm to make a breakthrough, I have to do it in a bloody fight. I must cover myself with the blood of a powerful opponent and kill him or her with my bare hands. That'll enable me to make a tear-skipping breakthrough and gain the same powers that my opponent has. What a horrifyingly mighty power this was. But Yunwoo secretly gasped, not because of his mysterious power, but because she was worried about him. He must cover himself with the blood of a powerful opponent and kill him or her with his bare hands. That means that he has to trade his blood, maybe even his life for breakthrough. He had literally gained this kind of talent and this kind of breakthrough by risking his life. She raised her head and her eyes met his wicked, black ones. She didn't know why, but for a second, when she saw his ghastly white face, she suddenly felt heartbroken over this man. But the next moment, the man's words ruined the moment. "Tiny, are you looking at me so seductively because you're fascinated by the charm of my endowments?" Watching the man who was smiling wickedly, she literally wanted to roll eyes at him. But at this moment she suddenly thought of something. "You're an early stage of Grand Kung Fu Master, so you got the powers of that Zwafeng?" Long Qingxie shrugged. His eyes were suddenly fixed on her with a weird look. "I did. But you're the one who killed him." This was also what he had been dismayed at. Yunwoo were the one who had killed the enemy, but he had still made a breakthrough, which was the first time that this kind of thing had happened. Hearing these words, Yunwoo also frowned, but even he himself didn't know why, not to mention her. After a night, Long Qingxie's strength fully recovered. He had lost so much blood that even all his clothes had been dyed red, but after a night, he recovered so well that it seemed as if nothing had ever happened to him. He should be the only one in this world who was capable of this. Long Qingxie walked out of the cave, dressed in white, silver-haired. Under the glow of the dawn, he was like a handsome man walking out of a painting. In particular, the languid half-smile on his handsome face was so charming that people who saw it would involuntarily hold their breath for so long that they might literally suffocate themselves. Yunwoo couldn't help muttering, "Yokai." Long Qingxie walked up to her and said with a big smile, "You like this?" There were only 3 words, but they had been uttered in a distinctly delighted tone. Yunwoo slightly squinted her beautiful eyes. This man has pretty quick ears. My voice was so low yet he still heard my words. Under his wicked gaze, Yunwoo curved the corner of her lips. "You're too coquettish and you might give me a heart attack, so I can't like you." Long Qingxie was stunned. His deep, black eyes met with Yunwoo's purple ones. Suddenly, he felt that his heart started beating much faster than usual. This woman is better at seducing people than my soul control technique. A wicked smile curled the corner of his lips. "You really can't stand it? Let me see." Upon these words, he reached out his hand to touch her chest. With a half-smile on her face, Yunwoo severely squinted. "Keep your hand going and I'll cut it off." Long Qingxie's hand instantly stopped moving. He frowned, and an affected, frightened expression appeared on his wicked, handsome face. "You're so ferocious. Who will dare to marry you? It seems that I'm the only one who'll have to make do with a marriage with you." The moment his words broke off, he shot out his hand and grabbed her bosom. "But, you'll have to eat more, so that these small steamed buns will someday grow into bigger steamed buns." His wicked, deep voice was heard. Eyes dilated, Yunwoo lowered her head and looked at her chest. She saw that the man's hands were shamelessly rubbing against her bosoms. Her face flushed red, embarrassment and anger rising inside her. She instantly clenched her teeth and thundered, "Long Qingxie. He keeps saying that he wants my bosoms to become bigger. Why does he always have to be so lewd and dirty?" Long Qingxie curved his lips in a wicked smile. "Aren't I right in front of you? You really didn't have to yell that loud. People might think that you like me very much." Yunwoo's eyes were blazing with anger. She twitched her hand and a wicked-looking giant knife appeared. "Do you believe that I can literally cut off your claws?" "I do. But I can't let you do that, because I'll need them to enjoy big steam buns in the future." Long Qingxie smiled evilly and seductively, as if he was having a good time watching the furious look on her face. "Then enjoy this giant knife first." Clenching her teeth, Yunwoo actually swung the giant knife at him. But Long Qingxie gave a mysterious smile, and then his figure suddenly moved forward. "Bo!" Yunwoo felt something flashed past her eyes. He gave her a kiss, his soft thin lips quickly touching her red ones. When she blinked again, Long Qingxia's figure had turned into a white blur and shot far away. "Tiny, don't get lost. Catch up with me," the man raised his voice and yelled, clearly in a delighted mood. Yunwoo stood transfixed for a couple of seconds. After she collected herself, she discovered that her heart was fluttering. This goddamn yokai. Glaring at the man in the distance, Yunwoo clenched her teeth, but then she started pursuing him without hesitation. In the depths of the magic beasts forest. As they approached this area, they found that all the magic beasts here seemed to have disappeared. Even if occasionally one or two showed up, they seemed pretty listless. It was weirdly quiet. This was the depths of the forest, and there should be a lot of lively magic beasts running around here. But surprisingly, they hadn't met a single magic beast for a day and a night, and neither had there been any so-called crises. Things were going unusually smoothly. However, when Yunwoo found another withered vigor grasses, she frowned tightly. Another withered one. What happened here? We've searched high and low in this area, but all we've found are scorched ones. Since they entered the depths of this forest, they had been searching for a day and a night only to find that all vigor grasses here had withered. It seemed as if something had sucked them dry. All those vigor grasses were among thick weeds, yet they were the only ones that had withered, which was the strangest thing. Long Qingxia glanced around, puzzled. "Let's keep moving." Yunwoo nodded. They immediately started walking towards the mountain in the middle of the forest. However, they had just walked a little further when the sounds of fighting were heard. Roar, and there were also roars of ferocious beasts. There seems to be something worth watching. Should we go and check it out? Or should we take a detour? Long Qingxia's eyes flashed in the direction of Yunwoo, asking in a deep voice. Lifting her eyebrows, Yunwoo glanced at the man who had a languid half-smile on his face. She knew that the fighting ahead must have aroused this man's interest. Actually, she wasn't really interested, but they had been traveling in this area for a day and a night yet had barely seen any magic beasts. And now, judging by those roars, there seemed to be plenty of magic beasts fighting with humans. She couldn't help feeling curious. "Let's go and take a look." After saying this, Yunwoo flashed forward soundlessly. And then she sneaked towards the spot where the fighting was happening. She was so light on her feet that she moved like a breeze, leaving no trace. Long Qingxia curved the corner of his lips in a smile tinged with wickedness, mumbling, "You look uninterested, but you made you move even quicker than I." After saying this, with a sudden move of his body, he shot forward like a flash of white light in the direction of the woman. Attack from the left side and breach their defense, whatever the cost. A female voice was heard among the noises of fighting. Judging from the voice, the female was Snow Murong, whom Yunwoo had met on the periphery of Magic Beast's forest. Hearing her yell, 3 men immediately launched an attack on the targets on their right side. But clearly, the 3 men were not powerful enough to break through the encirclement of over 10 Tier 5 magic beasts. But apart from Snow Murong and her men, there were another group of people who were also besieging those magic beasts. They were 12 Tier 6 guards under the command of a young man. Dressed in a grey robe, that man was about 23 or 24 years old. He had a well-featured face and looked rather elegant. Like Snow Murong, he was standing by. Those 12 guards of his had been trying to break through those magic beasts and reach the center, but all their efforts so far had been in vain. "Oh Yangke, I didn't expect that you would also come here. But I'm telling you, this vigor grass is mine. I'll do anything to get it." Snow Murong glanced at that grey-robed man, a cold, sneering look on her face. Located in 2 neighboring cities, the Ouyang family and the Murong family were mortal enemies. Hearing her words, Ouyang gave a faint smile. "Lady Murong's breath is just as bad as usual. I can smell it from so far away." The sarcasm in his voice was neither too heavy nor too light, but Snow Murong's face instantly turned livid with rage. "You." All of a sudden. Roar, continuous roars of magic beasts interrupted her. Besieged by so many humans, those magic beasts went furious and they instantly became more ferocious. Soon, scent of blood pervaded the forest. Originally, Snow Murong and Ouyang Ku had been standing at the side, but seeing this, they could no longer stand by. They whipped out their swords and joined the fight. It was a scrimmage. Yun Wu was hiding in a big tree. Seeing the fight, she instantly got excited. Two groups of people were having an intense fight with a flock of Tier 5 magic beasts, and what they were fighting for was a plant growing on a rock surrounded by those magic beasts. That green grass was nothing else but the vigor grass that Yun Wu had been seeking for a day and a night. How could Yun Wu not feel excited on the sight of a live vigor grass? But when she saw that Snow Murong, she slightly lifted her eyebrows. It turned out that Snow Murong was also here for vigor grasses. However, since this vigor grass had been seen by her, then it would naturally belong to her, Feng Wu. Tiny, I can see that your eyes brightened. Any chance you want to join the scrimmage? Long Qingxia lifted his eyebrows and looked the woman beside him, smiling. Hearing this, Yun Wu raised her eyebrows and glanced at him. You think I have nothing else to do? Join the scrimmage? She wasn't interested at all. The only thing she was interested in was that vigor grass in the middle. A wicked smile appeared on Long Qingxia's face, the tips of his long fingers idly stroking her black hair falling on her shoulders. It seems that you little thing want to take the grass after they finish the fight. Yun Wu slowly curved up the corner of her lips. If you want to join the fight and have some fun, I won't stop you. Long Qingxia smiled wickedly. What a sinister woman. Curving her lips, Yun Wu looked at him with a half smile on her face. If I'm sinister, then you're sly, dark and venomous. Which is why we'll make a perfect couple. Long Qingxia's voice was enchanting, deep and very pleasant. Yun Wu rolled her eyes at him but didn't contradict. She turned her head aside to continue watching the scrimmage. The acquiescence of the woman made Long Qingxia's deep, black eyes somewhat deeper, and the smile on his handsome face was unusually coquettish, which indicated that he was in a pretty good mood. However, there were always unexpected twists and turns when things were coming to an end. The scrimmage didn't last long. When the teams of both Snow Murong and Ouyang Ku were about to lose, two people with potent qi rapidly approached them from outside the forest. As soon as the two figures arrived, they exerted their Tier 9 fighting spirit and swung their sabers at the flock of magic beasts. Thud! A saber slash hit the targets. Several magic beasts were wounded, letting out roars of pain. Then the two figures leaped down onto the ground. Snow Murong's arm had been scratched by a magic beast and the wound was bleeding. On the sight of the person who had just landed, she yelled delightedly, "Second uncle." That was a middle-aged man about 40 years old, dressed in dark purple brocade robe. The look on his face was somewhat cold. It seemed that he was a serious man. Seeing the wounded arm of Snow Murong, he reprimanded with a frown, "Who allowed you to come to the depths of this forest? This is unbelievable." Hearing her second uncle's reprimand, Snow Murong curled her lips with an aggrieved look. "Second uncle, I did this because I'm worried about grandfather." Under Sky Murong's cold gaze, Snow Murong was rather afraid, but as if trying to justify her deeds, she hurriedly said, "Second uncle, don't be mad. I've already found a vigor grass. It's right there." Looking in the direction that Snow Murong was pointing in, Sky Murong saw that vigor grass growing on a rock surrounded by magic beasts. But at the same time, there was also a middle-aged man standing by Ouyang Ku's side. Dressed in a dark gray brocade robe, that man looked quite gentle, as if he was just a weak intellectual. "It's been a long time, Brother Murong. How are you?" Sky Murong gave a cold glance at him and said in a grim tone, "Ouyang Qing, stop acting like a bookish nerd. This vigor grass belongs to Murong family. Father needs this vigor grass to treat his strange illness. I must get it, whatever the cost." Hearing this, Ouyang Qing smiled gently. "Ouyang family happens to need this vigor grass as well. I'm afraid it won't be easy for Murong family to get it." Sky Murong squinted and an aggressive look flashed across his black eyes. However, the next second, he abruptly flashed towards that vigor grass on the rock in the middle, planning to make the first move. So despicable. With a grim smile, Ouyang Qing flashed squarely towards him just as quick. In the blink of an eye, two figures tangled with each other amid the flock of magic beasts. At the same time, other people on different sides also started fighting. In the big tree, Yunwu and Long Qingxie were hiding behind dense foliage. Their chi was light and steady, and both of the two Tier 9 warriors hadn't detected them. The fight is pretty intense. Watching the scrimmage down below, Long Qingxie amusingly curved his lips in a smile and turned his head aside. Tiny, it seems to have become more difficult for you to take advantage of their fight. Yunwu raised her eyebrows but said nothing. That was true. Although the two Tier 9 Kung Fu experts were evenly matched, judging by their previous conversation, it was nearly impossible for her to wait for them to end up both seriously injured. But even if the two wouldn't end up both seriously wounded, she would only have to go through just a little more trouble. Besides, she had this extremely powerful man on her side. But at this moment, Yunwu suddenly felt a warm breath passed by her sensitive earlobe. Before she could react, the man put his arm around her waist. Long Qingxie's deep voice was tinged with wickedness. Give me a kiss and I'll join the fight. And then you can just go take the grass. Yunwu turned her head aside to evade his hot breath only to saw his deep, black eyes. His eyes were as black as two deep pools, profound and incomprehensible. A man like this was actually rather startling, and he also gave her a sense of insecurity, because so far, she still couldn't figure him out. Long Qingxie also closely stared at her. Her exquisite features were flawless, and her beauty was breathtaking, but her purple pupils were clean and the look in them bland. Although her lips curved in a smile, it was not difficult for him to sense the absorbed, integrated blandness in her. Like an ethereal white cloud floating high up in the sky, she gave him a feeling that he could never get close to her heart. If he was to hold on to a woman like her, he had to capture her heart first. But before that, he had to find a way to break the apathy in her. At this moment, he tightened his arm around Yunwu's waist and raised her chin with the other hand. Lowering his head, he pressed his sexy, thin lips towards Yunwu's red ones. However, when their lips were about to meet, Yunwu reached out her hand and blocked the path of his lips. You haven't finished the job yet. Wouldn't I be taken advantage of if I let you claim the reward in advance? Looking at him with a smile, Yunwu said in a low voice. You'll be mine in the future anyway, so this doesn't count as taking advantage of you. A small part of the reward in advance will be a great motivation for me, Long Qingxie said in a constricted and serious voice, yet the corner of his lips curved into a meaningful smile. Yunwu raised her eyebrows with a half-smile on her face. Are you saying that you won't take this task seriously if I don't give you part of the reward in advance? Long Qingxie moved close to her and answered in a wicked, deep voice, of course. I'm a profiteering merchant. At this moment, a yell of anger was heard. The two people, who were fighting at close quarters, were evenly matched, so it was natural that they started playing dirty tricks. There was a bloody cut on Sky Murong's arm, and he was extremely angry. Ouyang Qing, you literally stooped to shooting hidden weapons from behind. Don't you feel ashamed? You're no better than me. Compared with you, Sky Murong, I'm a far less despicable man. There was also a bloody cut on Ouyang Qing's shoulder. Humph. Then today let's settle the scores between us, both new and old ones. I can't wait. In the twinkling of an eye, the two figures shot at each other and started fighting again. The sounds of the fierce fighting ignited an intense aura of killing, and violent undulations of Tier 9 warriors' power rippled outwards. The chi was so potent that even those magic beasts around were pushed backwards by the after effects. Yunwu was still hiding in the tree, and suddenly her heart seemed to have left her chest to pound in her throat. Because she noticed that the vigor grass on the rock was about to be broken by the power undulations. Once picked or broken, vigor grasses would soon lose its medicinal effects and wither, so vigor grasses must be used on site. When the two sides were in a chaotic fight, a slim, purple figure with black hair and divine beauty leaped downward straight onto that rock. However, she didn't even glance at those fighting around her. Instead, she crouched down and started cautiously digging that vigor grass along with the rock. Seeing what she was doing, everybody around her instantly stopped fighting. You. It's you. Snow Murong abruptly frowned on the sight of Yunwu. She's that mysterious teenage girl that I met on the periphery that night. Snow, you know her. Sky Murong glanced in the direction of Yunwu with a frown, startled secretly. When did this teenage girl come? Did she just arrive or has she been hiding nearby for a long time? He thought. Surprisingly, he hadn't noticed her existence at all. Ouyang Qing also slightly squinted, peering at her secretly. Even he hadn't sensed her qi. Who was she exactly? But when Ouyang Ku saw Yunwu's beauty, a flicker of astonishment flashed across the bottom of his eyes. I don't know her. I just met her on the periphery the other day when I passed by, Snow Murong replied to Sky Murong, but her eyes were fixed on Yunwu all along. Did she use some kind of smokescreen that night? Otherwise, how come she disappeared at a speed that quick? She's just a teenage girl 15 or 16 years old. Yunwu was not really interested in their peering and speculations. She cautiously extracted that vigor grass with a dagger. And then she planned to take a small basin out of her storage space and put the plant in. And then the job would be done. But at this moment. Little girl, that vigor grass belongs to Murong family, so please return that vigor grass to us, Sky Murong said coldly. No matter how mysterious this teenage girl was, people of the Murong family were determined to get this vigor grass. There's no Murong family's name on this vigor grass, and yet you said that it's yours. Aren't you bullying this girl? Surprisingly, it was Ouyang Ku who spoke. The moment his words broke off, he nodded at Yunwu in a polite and elegant manner, as if he was greeting her. Seeing his behavior, Snow Murong snorted coldly. But an aggressive look suddenly appeared in Sky Murong's eyes and he coldly glanced in the direction of Ouyang Ku. You junior, you're in no place to speak. Even so, you're in no place to lecture him. A grim smile appeared on Ouyang Qing's mild face. Sky Murong's face darkened. Ouyang Qing turned to Yunwu and said mildly, little girl, that vigor grass is really very important to me. I need it to save someone's life. Would you please sacrifice it to me? I'm Ouyang Qing from the Ouyang family in Water City. As long as you give that vigor grass to me, I'll owe you a favor. What do you say? He was refined, elegant and polite. Compared with Sky Murong's words, Ouyang Qing's remarks were much more pleasant. But this Ouyang Qing was obviously a two-faced person, and beneath his mild and refined exterior, he was very dangerous. Sky Murong was no better than him. A righteous man as seemed, judging by his previous behavior, he was probably a sly and devious man. Yunwu curved up the corner of her lips. Gave it to him. Was that even possible? With an instant shift of her attention, a jade bowl about the size of a palm appeared in her hand. Without answering Ouyang Qing, she put the vigor grass in the bowl. And then she twitched her hand and sent the grass into her storage space under the gaze of everybody. Storage space. When Yunwu took that jade bowl out of thin air, all people present dilated their eyes, greed glinted in them. They knew that storage space was very rare, and that even those with enough money couldn't find a seller. Unexpectedly, this teenage girl had a storage space. But the next moment, when they saw that Yunwu put away the vigor grass into her storage space, all their faces instantly darkened. Little girl, what do you think you are doing? Ouyang Qing frowned, a cold look flickering in his eyes. With an icy, sullen look on his face, Sky Murong glared at Yunwu. You dared to play us? Hand over the vigor grass immediately, or else I won't go easy on you. Hearing this, Yunwu finally couldn't help smiling. I seem to be getting this a lot lately. I wonder how hard you're going to go on me. Her purple eyes darted around, exerting some kind of mysterious suction. For a moment, those whose eyes met her purple pupils seemed to be transfixed. They felt as if their souls had been immobilized, along with their bodies. Sky Murong and Ouyang Qing, who were at Tier 9, instantly reacted to the danger, startled secretly. They immediately moved their eyes aside, mobilizing powerful qi in their body so as to fight against the restriction exerted on them by her weird purple eyes. "Don't watch her eyes!" Sky Murong yelled. Waving his hand, he exerted a surge of earth element and shrouded Snow Murong and the others with it so as to block their view of Yunwu's eyes. Ouyang Qing also took action quickly. Water element surged towards Ouyang Ku and the others and covered them, a curtain of light blue light isolating them from Yunwu's gaze. Seeing that her plan had got seen through so soon, Yunwu felt rather bored. It seemed that the first level of the mind control technique, which was Soul Chain, wasn't powerful enough. She had to put some efforts into the cultivation of it. Thinking about this, Yunwu leaped down the rock and was about to leave. "Little girl, you can't take this vigor grass away." Ouyang Qing didn't look good, but he still blocked her path. "Why can't I take it away? Is your name on it as well?" Yunwu gave a leisurely glance at him, but then she also secretly glanced at a big tree not far away. "Just because I didn't let him kiss me, he really won't come down and help. He's so petty." At this moment, Sky Murong also flashed over. "Hand over the vigor grass if you want to leave, or else you'll have to leave your life here as well." Sky Murong blocked Yunwu's path with a cold face, an icy and wicked look appearing in his eyes. Yunwu sneered secretly, thinking, "You think you're capable of taking my life?" However, Yunwu said nothing. She detoured around them as if they didn't exist and intended to leave. "Little girl, don't push me." Sky Murong's eyes became ferocious. His Tier 9 early stage qi started churning in him. Naturally, Yunwu felt the threatening undulations of his fighting spirit. She slowly stopped, turned her head back and looked at Sky Murong's cold, arrogant face. He probably thought that she was afraid. As if he was showing mercy on her, he said, "Since you're still young, I'll give you a second chance. Hand over that vigor grass immediately and I'll spare you." Yunwu couldn't help letting out a laugh. Spare her? Did she need him to spare her? He sounded as if he was a good Samaritan, which was so funny. "What's so funny?" Sky Murong frowned. Yunwu raised her eyes and curved the corner of her lips in a smile, saying in a bored tone, "Who do you think I was laughing at except for you? You snotty-nosed little kid are so arrogant. I'd like to find out what gives you the courage to sneer at me." Annoyed and embarrassed, Sky Murong eventually became furious. He abruptly mobilized the qi in him and hurled it directly towards Yunwu. A dismissive look flashed across the bottom of Yunwu's eyes. With deft footwork, her figure flashed aside and dodged his attack. Tier 7 early stage wind attribute. The moment they sensed Yunwu's strength, all people present were stunned and with that a flicker of astonishment flashed across their eyes. Early stage of Tier 7. She was so young, but she was already an early stage of Tier 7. Snow Murong was already 20, and everybody in Luoyang City regarded her as a genius among geniuses, but even she was only in peak stage of Tier 3. This teenage girl was only 15 or 16, but she was already at Tier 7. Everybody knew very well what this meant. A Tier 7 Kung Fu master who was only a teenager. Her talent was literally against the rules of nature. Snow Murong frowned, jealousy and anger welling up inside her. She always believed that the reason why Yunwu suddenly disappeared that night was because she used some kind of smokescreen. She hadn't expected that Yunwu was a Tier 7 Kung Fu expert. Where did that leave her, a genius among geniuses? No, she has to disappear. She has to be wiped off the face of this world. Second uncle, she's so arrogant. Kill her. So that we can get not only the vigor grass but also the storage space, killing two birds with one stone, Snow Murong said to Sky Murong in a deep voice, a sinister and venomous look appearing in her eyes. Hearing her words, Sky Murong was somewhat hesitant. But soon he thought of his previous attitude as well as hers, realizing that it was impossible to co-opt her. A genius with extraordinary talents like her will definitely make remarkable achievements in the future. And what happened today might be a reason for her taking revenge on me someday. I must kill her. Sky Murong's face abruptly became murderous, killing aura surging out of him. No wonder you snotty kid are so arrogant. It turns out that you're an early stage of Tier 7. Today, I'd like to find out what you can do with your pathetic Tier 7 early stage strength. Yunwoo squinted her cold eyes, watching Sky Murong, who had suddenly become murderous. She had a vague idea of what he might be thinking about. If he was unable to have an extraordinary genius, like her, whom he had already offended, to work for him, then he must kill her, lest she became powerful enough one day and come back to retaliate against him. However, what they hadn't expected was that if she wanted to retaliate, she didn't have to wait any longer, that she could kill them right now. The instant his words broke off, Sky Murong's figure vanished into thin air. The look in Yunwoo's eyes became cold. Her spiritual power instantly surged out of her body, spread in all directions and pervaded the whole place. This guy really has some dirty tricks. I'm only an early stage of Tier 7, but he still wants to attack me from behind instead of attacking frontally. He's indeed a sinister and despicable guy. Whoosh! With a flash of cold light and the sound of splitting air, a sword was thrust at Yunwoo's back. People around saw that a sword suddenly shot out of thin air and sank into Yunwoo's body like greased lightning. Ouyang Qing slightly frowned. He somewhat disdained Sky Murong's despicable deeds, but he had never had any intentions to stop him. Surprisingly, Ouyang Ke's face instantly darkened on the sight of Sky Murong's sneak attack. He had meant to rush forward, don't hurt her. But Ouyang Qing stopped him. However, the next second, everybody was astonished. How was it possible? Sky Murong still maintained his position of that sneak attack, but Yunwoo's figure, which had just been stabbed by that sword, twisted and with that it disappeared. A blur. Yes, that was only a blur left by Yunwoo. The moment Yunwoo's blur disappeared, Snow Murong's face instantly changed. This is exactly what happened that night. Sky Murong was an early stage of Tier 6, and she was only an early stage of Tier 7. Even if she was wind attributed, there was no way that she could dodge a sneak attack launched by a Tier 9 Kung Fu master, but she had not only managed to evade it but also disappeared into thin air. Her speed is unbelievably fast. Who is she exactly? Sky Murong was also somewhat astounded. He had spared no strength just now, intending to kill her as soon as possible, but watching the position where that vanished blur used to be, he was transfixed with disbelief. Those who want to take my life will lose their own lives first. A cold voice suddenly passed by Sky Murong's ears like a phantom. Sky Murong's figure subconsciously flashed forward, swinging his sword at the source of that voice. When Sky Murong's sword was swung downwards, Yunwoo's figure, which had just flashed out, turned into twisted blur again. The speed was very fast. The concentration of wind element in the air was countless times higher than usual. Ouyang Qing, who had been standing on the other side spectating the fight, was somewhat horrified. A Tier 7 early stage warrior could never move at that speed. But soon Sky Murong grasped the pattern of Yunwoo's movements. Having been played by her for so long, he went furious. Tier 9 fighting spirit surged out and in the blink of an eye, he abruptly slashed at the position where Yunwoo flashed out. Yunwoo's lips curved up and she drew a sword instantly. With a surge of potent, scorching fire element in her body, the sword was covered by fire and she shot forward head-on. Clang! A piercing sound of swords clashing together was heard. Shit! Sky Murong's face slightly changed, feeling a burning heat coming at him from Yunwoo's sword, which caused his hands to start spitting. That was some kind of weird power that seemed like fire elemental power but wasn't. However, he had confirmed one thing, she was actually double attributed. Seeing this scene, those who had been watching at the side also widened their eyes and they could no longer conceal their astonishment. Double attributed? She is actually double attributed. Buzz. At this time, the two swords which had been pressed against each other suddenly separated, and that intangible power as well as the mysterious scorching heat violently spread outwards in all directions. Ouyang Qing quickly grabbed Ouyang Ku and backed off to dodge the shock waves and the heat. Snow Murong, who was under the protection of 3 men in front of her, couldn't help feeling terrified. What kind of power is this? Is that teenage girl really just a human? You're double attributed. Who the hell are you? There was a sepulchral look in Sky Murong's eyes, and his hands were in burning pain. Yunwu curved her lips in a half-smile. Do you think it's necessary for me to explain it to you? However, she had indeed become somewhat impatient with these people. She felt that it was very boring to stop the fight halfway to talk nonsense. Yunwu detoured around them and intended to leave. You want to leave just like this? Sky Murong yelled coldly, his eyes blazing with anger. Should she stay and waste more time? She was not interested. But she would like to find out how much longer Long Qingxie, who was hiding on the tree, could keep standing by and watching her fight. Seeing that Yunwu ignored him, Sky Murong was annoyed, embarrassed and eventually got furious. He thundered, what are you standing there for? Kill her. The 3 Tier 8 warriors, who had been protecting Snow Murong, was stunned at first, but soon they mobilized their fighting spirit, whipped out their swords and launched attack on Yunwu. Yunwu didn't try to dodge. But at this moment, before the 3 Tier 8 warriors could get close to their target, a pleasant, magnetic and slow voice tinged with wickedness came to their ears, you dare to mess with my woman. I think you must have overfed yourselves. A figure in white clothes leaped down onto the ground in a supernatural manner, his silver hair fluttering. But at the same time, 3 gleams of cold light flashed across those people's eyes and went into the bodies of the 3 warriors. Pooh! The 3 warriors were darting towards Yunwu, but their faces changed drastically. They felt a numbness and abruptly knelt down, spitting out a mouthful of black blood. Foul smell of blood instantly pervaded the place. Poison. Sky Murong's body gave a shake. He watched that handsome silver-haired man who had suddenly shown up, his heart shivering involuntarily. He had also failed to detect this man before he appeared. Besides, this man had actually breached Tier 8 peak stage defense with merely a small dagger. Long Qingxie curved his lips in a wicked, languid smile, walked up to Yunwu and mumbled affectionately, so naughty. Lifting her eyebrows and curving her lips, Yunwu watched him with a smile. Didn't you say that without getting part of the reward in advance, you would just stand by? Long Qingxie shrugged languidly with a seemingly resigned look, you got me. From now on, you have to be responsible for me. Hearing this, Yunwu got speechless. However, at this moment, the 2 people had no intentions to put on a love scene of sparring verbally. Under everybody's gaze, they just idly started walking away. Both people of the Murong family and those of the Ouyang family were stunned, watching the 2 people who were walking side by side. What's happening? Wait! Ouyang Qing immediately yelled. In the twinkling of an eye, he flashed forward and blocked the 2 people's path. What are you doing? You want to get in our way as well? Long Qingxie raised his eyebrows with a piercing look in his wicked, black eyes. An observant man as he was, Ouyang Qing had noticed all the subtle changes of Long Qingxie's expression. He smiled gently, don't take me wrong. I have no intention to make an enemy of yours, but my father is seriously ill. He's been lying in bed and he really needs this vigor grass as a messenger drug. May I ask if you can kindly give it to me? No matter how much money you want, Ouyang family will pay it. Money? Yunwu curved her lips. Having stolen the whole royal treasure house, she was already a rich woman. Why would she trade the grass for money? Although this Ouyang Qing looked less hateful than that Sky Murong, but that was all. However, before Yunwu could speak, Long Qingxie said lazily, since the grass is already in our pocket, we will never give it to anybody, so just get out of our way if you don't have any other business concerning us. Ouyang Qing's face went cold. Gentlemen, we've always been polite to you, so you should at least show some respect to us. Show some respect? Long Qingxie curved his lips in a smile, but the look in his eyes suddenly went icy. Just now you intended to attack my woman. And now you want me to show you some respect. Who do you think you are? The moment he finished the last word in a cold voice, a burst of potent qi abruptly surged out of him. He waved his hand and Ouyang Qing was thrown out. Ouyang Qing impacted hard on a nearby tree. His face instantly went ghastly white, horror glinting in his eyes. Jia, Grand Kung Fu Master. How was this possible? How come this seemingly 20-year-old man was a Grand Kung Fu Master? Sky Murong was also shocked, watching Long Qingxie with widened eyes, his heart quivering even more violently. He was actually a Grand Kung Fu Master. No wonder he could breach Tier 9 peak stage defense with merely a dagger. Watching the man and the woman walking further away, nobody dared to go forward and try to stop them, and nobody could stop them. Who were they exactly? A mysterious teenage girl at Tier 7 and a powerful young man who was a Grand Kung Fu Master. Anybody who saw the two would feel amazed and shocked, which was exactly how these people felt at this moment. You were cool. Why didn't you show up earlier? After walking out of those people's sight, Yunwu raised her eyebrows, turned her head aside and glanced at the man beside her. With a wicked smile, Long Qingxie stretched out his arm and wrapped it around her waist. I just wanted to give you a chance to show your strength. If I had shown up and finished the fight at once, how could you show it? Yunwu slapped his hand off her waist and simpered, saying, well, then I have to thank you. Because of the opportunity you gave me, I did have a good time showing my strength. If you really want to thank me, how about a kiss? Long Qingxie had a thick skin, regarding her sarcastic words as compliments. He even puckered his lips and moved on to Yunwu for a kiss. With a seemingly disgusted look, Yunwu stretched out her hand and pushed his handsome face away. Don't go too far. Or I'll be mad at you. When were you not mad at me? But I like it when you're mad. Long Qingxie curved his lips in a smile, which made his bright black eyes exceptionally dazzling. He looked as seductive as a vamp. Yunwu couldn't help muttering secretly, yokai. Fine. Save your lies. We've got a vigor grass, so pure blood and dragon blood are all we need. Let's go back to the imperial capital right now. Long Qingxie withdrew his wicked grin and put on his usual languid look. There's no hurry. We can wait a little while longer. Tell me, how long has it been since the last time that you drank beast blood? Hearing Long Qingxie's words, Yunwu was stunned. That was right. If he hadn't mentioned this, she wouldn't have recalled that she hadn't drunk any beast blood for 7 or 8 days. Although she hadn't had any abnormal feelings, Elder White had once said that she needed beast blood to prevent her body from rotting. So no abnormal feelings didn't mean that everything was okay. Yunwu didn't know whether it was some kind of psychological effect, but she suddenly felt that her whole body wasn't right, as if her blood and flesh were not fresh enough. Then let me go and get some beast blood first. Upon these words, Yunwu intended to rush away. In this area, except for those magic beasts that they had seen during that scrimmage, there didn't seem to be any other magic beasts around, so they would have to go to some other areas to search, or go to the periphery. However, a big hand grabbed Yunwu before she could leave. What's the rush? I haven't finished my word yet. What else? The blood of high-level magic beasts is more nourishing to your body. Now that we are already so deep in the forest, let's get us a high-level one. Hearing Long Qingxie's words, Yunwu frowned, thinking about which level she could handle with her current power. She had 7 elemental sources in her, but she had also discovered that it was more strength-consuming to use those 7 elemental power than it was to use fighting spirit, which meant that she should avoid long fights. Considering all these factors, she'd better choose a magic beast that was approximately in peak stage of Tier 4 as her target. Let's go and find some magic beasts first. After saying this, Yunwu flashed towards the depths of the forest. Blood of high-level magic beasts was indeed highly beneficial to her health. After the last time that she drank the blood of a red fire dragon, she had felt exceptionally comfortably for days without drinking any extra beast blood. Maybe, if she managed to get some blood of a high-level magic beast, she wouldn't need to go hunting at all during the few days that she was going to spend in the Imperial City. Long Qingxie followed her in a leisurely manner. With his current power, he could easily handle all magic beasts the levels of which were below Tier 6. Magic beasts at levels higher than Tier 6 were intelligent, and when magic beasts possessed intelligence just like humans did, they were difficult to deal with. On their way deeper into the mountain, Yunwu noticed something weird. Finally, she couldn't help but stop moving. What's wrong? Long Qingxie stopped beside her. All medicinal herbs withered in this area. Yunwu looked around and said with a frown. Other people might not have noticed this, but she was very knowledgeable about medicine, and in her eyes, medicinal herbs were exceptionally special existence. Among dense grass, there was a wide variety of medicinal herbs of different medicinal properties, but they had all withered. If there was only a small number of herbs that had withered, she wouldn't have found it weird, but along their way, she had discovered that all medicinal herbs without exception seemed to have been sucked dry by something. Wasn't this similar to what they had seen on their way to find a vigor grass? Was there any chance that the two were related? Hearing her words, Long Qingxie also looked around. After checking carefully, he lifted his eyebrows. Under normal circumstances, there is always something eccentric around when this special phenomenon happens. After saying this, Long Qingxie curved his lips in a smile and looked at Yunwu. Do you want to go and find out what it is? If there are any high-level magic beasts, we can conveniently get you some beast blood. Yunwu's lips curved up. Okay, then. Let's go and take a look. She really wanted to find out what kind of eccentric thing could suck all the medicinal herbs in such a wide area dry. Walking through areas with withered medicinal herbs, they detoured around that mountain. Eventually, they arrived at a place among some hidden peaks. There were many sharp-edged and steep rocks among those peaks. If people didn't look carefully, they would think those were just rocks fallen off from the peaks. There was nothing unusual about those rocks, and they wouldn't attract anybody's attention. However, tsk. This is just majestic. Lying prostrate on the top of one of those rocks, Yunwu and Long Qingxie watched the scene down below. Both of them involuntarily lift their eyebrows. There was a valley surrounded by those peaks, and in the middle of the valley, there was a lake about the size of a pool around which there were exuberant green grass. And at the feet of those peaks, there were all kinds of precious spiritual herbs. There were blood lotus, white ganoderma, holy gragon grass. The whole valley was full of these herbs, both the variety and the number of which were incredible. Different medicinal herbs grew in different fields. Judging by the orderliness and the pattern, these herbs weren't natural. Someone had planted them here. But what kind of people would come to the middle of the magic beast's forest to grow these spiritual herbs? What kind of relation was there between those withered medicinal herbs outside and this valley full of spiritual herbs? Tiny, look at that. Suddenly, the man's magnetic, deep voice came to her ears. Looking in the direction that Long Qingxie was looking, Yunwu saw what he was seeing. In the middle of the lake, there was a small weedy platform. Among those weeds, there was a two-leaved plant with a flame-like fruit. It took a flame fruit plant 500 years to blossom and another 500 years to fruit. Flame fruits were sacred fruits of fire attribute and were highly toxic, but they also had the best medicinal properties as well as special power of primal fire. If someone managed to absorb the power, his or her fire attribute would become several times stronger. And the root of a flame fruit plant possessed the efficacy of dissolving decayed bone tissue and revitalizing flesh. A piece of information passed across her mind. Yunwu lifted her eyebrows. No wonder all those medicinal herbs were sucked dry. It turns out that this 1,000-year-old flame fruit is reaching maturity. 1,000-year-old flame fruit? Hearing her words, Long Qingxie raised his eyebrows, his black eyes staring at her. Tiny, I didn't expect that you know about so many things. He knew that was a flame fruit only because he had once read about it in an ancient book. As regards the age of this flame fruit, even he couldn't tell, but she knew that flame fruit was 1,000 years old just by glancing at it. The little woman just never ceased to surprise him. Sometimes he even had a sudden urge to crack open her little head to see what was inside. You know a lot of things as well, don't you? Yunwu turned her head aside and glimpsed at him. She knew about it because she had the soaring dragon scroll, but this man was different. It seemed as if he knew everything, and there was always an air of mystery about him. Long Qingxie curved his lips in a wicked smile and ogled her. As a man who is worthy of you, I have to. Yunwu rolled her eyes at him. All of a sudden, Yunwu felt a sting in her wrist. Her bracelet gave off a colorful light, and then before Yunwu and Long Qingxie could react, a small wooden box automatically came out of her storage space. And with that the small wooden box opened. A shriveled small red bean whooshed towards the flame fruit down below on the lake. What's happening? Yunwu looked at the empty small wooden box and then glanced at that small red bean shooting towards the flame fruit, feeling confused. Wasn't that shriveled small red bean the very one that she had stolen from the royal treasure house? Long San said that it was a flower seed. And she had placed it at the bottom of her storage space. But now this scene was so strange. What happened exactly? It ran out of the storage space. Did that so-called flower seed have its own consciousness? Seeing this, Long Qingxie also frowned tightly, an amazed look on his handsome face. Clearly, he also didn't know what was happening. Let me get it back first. You stay here. Long Qingxie didn't know the reason why this weird thing had happened, but he must get that seed back. Yunwu wanted to say something, but Long Qingxie had already leaped down and flashed towards that lake in the middle of the valley. But the moment Long Qingxie leaped down, it seemed as if some kind of tranquility was broken by something. A weird sense of crisis rose in Yunwu. Click. What was that sound? Yunwu's eyes swept around vigilantly, but except for spiritual herbs and grass, she didn't see any magic beasts. And then Elder White's voice was heard in her mind. Yunwu's purple pupils abruptly contracted and she immediately leaped off the rock. Long Qingxie. Don't touch those grass. While flying downwards rapidly, Yunwu yelled urgently. But it was too late. The tips of Long Qingxie's shoes had touched the green grass. In the blink of an eye, the green grass abruptly wrapped themselves around Long Qingxie's feet and started climbing upwards, as if they had just been activated by something. Meanwhile, they revealed their hideous hook-like fangs beneath the leaves and snapped at Long Qingxie's feet. Long Qingxie was stunned and soon reacted. Warrior defensive power shielded him in, fire elemental power surging in him. Yunwu also started throwing flames towards those grass around him. Give me your hand. Long Qingxie didn't hesitate. He ripped off those grass twining around him and raised his hand. Yunwu immediately stretched out her hand and pulled Long Qingxie off the ground. The flame could only force those vampire grasses but couldn't hurt them. Click, click. Horrifying sounds of fangs grinding rippled across the whole valley. These are vampire grasses. If you got entangled in them, they'll soon suck you dry. Looking at the rippling vampire grasses down below, Yunwu said with a frown. Vampire grasses? Long Qingxie frowned with a grave look flashing across the bottom of his eyes. It ranked the 11th in the ferocious plants class. Rumor says this kind of plant has become extinct several hundred years ago. It turns out that they not only didn't become extinct but also were planted by someone to protect these spiritual herbs. No wonder there are no magic beasts around. With this spooky thing here, no creatures dare to come close, Yunwu said in a deep voice. Then she cast her eyes in the direction of that platform in the middle of the lake. She saw that the small red bean was on the top of the 1,000-year-old flame fruit surrounded by vampire grasses. All vampire grasses had been woken up. Their wicked-looking fangs gleamed under the sunlight with grinding sounds. Long Qingxie had never been a reckless man. The reason why he so eagerly wanted to help her get back that small red bean must be that he knew what it was. And it must be something unusual. Originally, Yunwu didn't care much about that small red bean, but now she had suddenly become interested in it. Not to mention that thing had always been hers, and she couldn't just give it up like this. Wait a moment. Yunwu said to Long Qingxie, and with that her figure shot towards that platform above the surface of the lake. When she got close to it, she flipped her hands, enwrapped them with fire element and grabbed that flame fruit among vampire grasses as quick as she could. She uprooted the whole plant. Rattle. As if those vampire grasses down below sensed that the flame fruit had been taken, they started crazily grinding their teeth and wiggling. Yunwu stood in the air and glanced down at them, her lips slightly curving in a smile. Horrifying as they were, vampire grasses were terrestrial plants after all. At this moment, she looked at the flame fruit about double the size of a palm in her hands, secretly sighed briefly. Because just by holding it in her hands, she could sense the dense primal fire in it. The fire element in her body seemed to have been tempted, which made her feel as if her blood was boiling. She could only imagine how much energy there was in this 1,000-year-old flame fruit. However, when Yunwu saw that shriveled small red bean adhering to the top of the flame fruit, she pulled a wry face. She could distinctly feel that the bean was absorbing the flame fruit's energy bit by bit. What kind of flower seed was it? Move aside. Long Qingxie's voice suddenly came. And with that his figure dashed over and pulled her aside, giving a downward hack with a sword covered with fire. Quack. An angry quacking came out of thin air. The space above the position which Long Qingxie had just slashed at twisted, and with that a giant, black shadow emerged. And a sharp claw whooshed across Yunwu's original position. Yunwu's heart lurched. If Long Qingxie hadn't pulled her aside in time, she would have been torn apart by that sharp claw. Damn it, she had actually failed to sense it. However, it was not until this moment that she saw clearly that giant black shadow which had appeared out of thin air was a beast that had a tiger's face and condor's wings. This was the first time that Yunwu had seen a beast like this since she arrived in this another world. Tiger condors were terrestrial magic beasts that could fly. They possessed potent offensive capacity and were good at hiding themselves in another dimension. Hiding themselves in another dimension. Did this by any chance mean that it had been hiding in another dimension all along? The moment she finished reading the information appeared in her mind, Yunwu felt a chill down her spine. It turned out that such a giant magic beast had been hiding above their heads from the very beginning. Don't just stand there like a fool. This is a tier 6 magic beast. Put away the flame fruit and leave here right away, Long Qingxie said in a serious tone, which was very rare. A tier 6 magic beast? With a fleeting shift of attention, Yunwu sent the flame fruit into the storage space provided by the red gemstone. Quack. However, the moment Yunwu put away the flame fruit, that tiger condor seemed to be provoked. It let out an angry squeak with fury glinting in its piercing eyes. The fighting spirit of a grand kung fu master surged out of Long Qingxie. Yunwu didn't turn around and flee right away. With a flip of her hands, burning flames appeared in her palms which were then pressed against each other. The contours of a dragon condensed into by fire element emerged. Roar. Roars of the dragon split the air. The mighty roars undulated towards the tiger condor like furious tides. They didn't know whether it was because of the daunting roars, but the tiger condor was stunned for a brief moment and a flicker of fear flashed across its angry eyes. Go! Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yunwu grabbed Long Qingxie and enveloped herself in wind element, planning to leave as fast as she could. But tier 6 magic beasts were intelligent creatures. With that dragon shadow formed of fire element, she could only fool the tiger condor for a little while. Before long, the tiger condor reacted. Quack. With an angry squeak, it swung its sharp claws at the dragon's shadow and tore it apart. The next second, the tiger condor raised its head and gave a squeak, as if it was summoning something. The squeak rippled through the whole forest. Meanwhile, as if having received some kind of order, those vampire grasses down below started pursuing Yunwoo hotly, one batch after another like they had feet. Yunwoo had never expected that she would be running away from plants and a flying beast in a mountain. Seeing that those vampire grasses were getting closer and closer with sounds of grinding teeth and that the tiger condor followed by a flock of flying beasts were also approaching, Yunwoo broke out in a cold sweat. But she pulled a wry face. Because right at this moment she felt that she was like a thief being hotly pursued. "Why didn't you leave first just now?" Under this urgent circumstance, Long Qingxia wrapped his arm around her thin waist, turned his head aside and gave a meaningful glance at her, asking this question in a deep voice. Frowning, Yunwoo asked rhetorically instead of answering, "You really want me to leave? You tiny little thing always try to evade my question." Long Qingxia seemed resigned. Yunwoo gave a glimpse at him out of the corner of her eye. "Then what kind of answer are you expecting me to give you?" Long Qingxia gave a wicked grin, hugging her waist tighter. "You know clearly about it." But at this moment, quack! A squeak came from the sky. The flock of flying beasts caught up with them and started flying downwards into the forest, chasing them at a steady speed. If there were only a couple of them, they might be able to handle, but now there was a flock. If they launched an attack, they would surely be surrounded. Frowning, the two people speeded up and fled straight forward. But soon their faces somewhat darkened. It turned out that it was a dead end. There was a cliff ahead of them, and at the bottom of the cliff there was a broad, fast-flowing river. They could hear the whoosh of the rushing water from far away. Both of them could fly by using lightness skills, but there was a large flock of flying beasts in the sky, which would probably intercept them soon if they flew. "Let's jump down," Yunwoo said decisively. Long Qingxia curved his lips in a smile. "Hold on tight." The two leaped off the cliff without any hesitation as soon as they rushed out of the forest. In the blink of an eye, the two figures disappeared into the raging torrent. Click, click. Standing at the edge of the cliff, those vampire grasses seemed very angry, grinding their teeth. In the sky, those flying beasts were circling. Seeing that the two figures had jumped into the fast-flowing river, the tiger condor let out angry squeaks repeatedly, quack, quack. In the innermost area of the magic beast's forest, an old man, who was sitting cross-legged like a stone statue in a cave, slowly opened his eerie, deep, black eyes. A piercing look flashed across those wise eyes which seemed to have witnessed vicissitudes of life. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man at the side also opened his eyes. "Shifu, that was a tiger condor's squeak. Go and take a look. The flame fruit will probably reach maturity in just a few days. We don't want any surprises." The old man's deep, dignified and old voice was heard. The middle-aged man nodded in respect. "Yes, Shifu." After saying this, he stood up and walked towards the entrance of the cave. The moment he walked out of the cave, with a sudden move of his body, he instantly vanished as if he had turned into air. If Yunwoo and Long Qingxia had seen this, they would surely be startled. Because that man's strength level was absolutely above that of a grand kung fu master, and if an apprentice's strength level was above that of a grand kung fu master, how powerful would his Shifu be? "Hold tight to me and don't let go." Long Qingxia was tightly holding Yunwoo's hand but was still unable to steady themselves due to the raging torrent. They had thought that the downstream part of the river would be slower. Unexpectedly, instead of becoming slower, the river flowed faster and faster as they floated downstream. Underwater there were many sharp rocks on which the strong current impacted from time to time. More and more cuts and bruises appeared on their bodies. Even if they were good swimmers, they wouldn't be able to control their directions under such circumstances. Not to mention that this river was very broad, and they couldn't find anything to grip on to get ashore. Snap! The sound of a bone breaking under impact was heard. Carried by the torrent, the two figures were drifting downstream rapidly. After an unknown length of time, Yunwoo gradually came around from a half-unconscious state. The moment she regained her sensation, sharp pains were felt. She could distinctly feel that several of her bones had been broken and that there were numerous cuts on her. Also, her abdomen had been penetrated by something. She couldn't help letting out a muffled grunt, and with that her consciousness gradually recovered under the stimulation of great pains. Slowly, she opened her eyes, discovering that she was lying on the riverside. Half of her body was still in the water and she felt icy cold. She feebly struggled to sit up, coughed and spat out the water in her mouth, feeling a burning pain in the throat. It was not until this moment that she saw clearly that there was a branch sticking in her abdomen. Her purple clothes were ragged and she was covered in wounds with multiple fractures. Even so, she was still alive. It seemed that this body of hers was indeed rather weird. However, a figure abruptly flashed across her mind. Longqingxie. This was a river with shingle riversides. Yunwu hurriedly looked around but found no trace of that man. She remembered that the last moment before she lost her consciousness, Longqingxie seemed to impact on a sharp rock trying to protect her. Although she knew that he possessed spontaneous healing power, she was still very worried about him. She attempted to stand up. But as she moved her body, the pains got intenser, as if every nerve in her body was screaming. Abruptly, a pang of intolerable pain shot across her body. Something sweet welled up to her throat. Pooh! She spat out a mouthful of blood. Yunwu's face went ghastly white, but she discovered that the blood that she had spat out was black. Black blood? What's going on? She wanted to check her physical condition, but the moment she tried to mobilize the qi in her dantian, the wound caused by that branch sticking in her abdomen ached badly. The great pain clutched at her every nerve and she nearly groaned involuntarily. She broke out in a cold sweat. Her ragged clothes were soaking wet and she couldn't tell whether it was because of the sweat or the river water. Still, Yunwu stretched out her hand and attempted to pull out that branch sticking in her abdomen. Having been soaking in water for so long, her wounds had become white. If she didn't pull this branch out, the wound would surely fester. However, the moment Yunwu's hand touched that branch, it twitched and sank deeper into her body. The pain was unbearable, but Yunwu abruptly widened her eyes. Watching that deadwood, Yunwu didn't find anything unusual about it. Was it because she was too weak so that she had just seen an illusion? Stretching out her hand, she touched it again. The branch sank deeper again and Yunwu's face abruptly went deathly pale. That was not an illusion. What the hell is this thing? She could distinctly feel that the branch seemed to be gnawing at the flesh in her abdomen, but it also seemed to be rooting and sprouting. Yunwu was horrified and this was the first time that she had felt fear. But right at this moment, from the wound where the branch was, waves of biting pains ferociously swept over Yunwu and she couldn't hold any longer. She lapsed into unconsciousness and fell to the ground limply. Faintly, she seemed to be hearing distant footsteps. How long has it been? Yunwu had no idea. When she came around from coma, she felt drowsy, and she also found that she was lying on a rough bed instead of on the riverside with parched lips and a deathly pale face. Yunwu slowly opened her purple eyes and this movement seemed to have cost all her strength. This was a very crude cottage and the furnishings in it were rather simple. Though it was not spacious, there were 2 beds in it. Apart from the rough bed that Yunwu was lying on, there was another worn one. It could be told that there should be 2 people living in this cottage. She faintly heard people talking outside the cottage. Little Leaf, I heard that your grandma took another people home. You barely have enough food for yourselves. Why did she take in a dying person again? Please take my advice and send that person back to the riverside while your grandma isn't home. Aunt, how could you say that? That is a person's life you were talking about. Not just my grandma, I myself would also have taken that person back if I were the one who found her, so stop nagging and go back to your own place if you don't have other business here. If my grandma hears your words, she'll get mad again. That was a fairly childish voice tinged with anger. Okay. But you and your grandma are good Samaritans. I, your aunt, am the villain. I was just thinking that you were having a hard time yourselves, so I wanted to remind you out of goodwill. It seems that I'm just being a busybody. No good deed goes unpunished, this is so true, the woman nagged and left, sounding as if she was very displeased. And then she faintly heard intermittent light footsteps. It seemed as if that person outside was walking back and forth and busy doing something. Yunwoo glanced around and noticed that the branch previously sticking in her abdomen was gone, and that all her wounds had been dressed. Did that person who saved me dress my wounds? Once touched, that branch would sink deeper into my body. How did that person get rid of it? These questions flashed through her mind, but gradually she felt as if her eyelids were getting heavier and that she was about to fall asleep again. Yunwoo knew that she was too feeble. The first reason for this was probably that she hadn't eaten anything for a long time, and she also hadn't drunk any beast blood for just as long, which might be another reason. She could distinctly feel that although her wounds had been dressed, they weren't healing at all. If she kept lying in bed like this, it was very unlikely for her body to recover naturally. Clenching her teeth, Yunwoo attempted to sit up. But at this moment, the door was pushed open. A petite figure holding a bowl of medicine walked in. The moment that girl saw that Yunwoo had woken up, she hurriedly reminded her, "Don't get up. You're still very weak. You might worsen the wounds." After putting down the bowl on the table, the girl came over, grabbed a pillow and cautiously placed it upright at the head of the bed so that Yunwoo could lean on it. "I did what my grandma told me to and dressed your wounds after washing them with medicine, but it's been 3 days and your wounds still didn't heal. My grandma said that your injuries were too serious and that you had been soaking in water for too long. This morning, she went to the mountain to collect medicinal herbs for you. Be a good girl and lie in bed. If your wounds ache, try to subdue the pain. I've decocted some herbal medicine for you. You'll gradually feel better after drinking it. Don't worry." This was a little girl about 10 years old. Her skin color was somewhat unduly yellow, but she had bright, big eyes and comely countenance. She talked with a frown on her face, as if she was an adult. However, Yunwoo could tell from her tone that she was a kind-hearted girl. "Don't move. I'll go and get the medicine for you," the girl reminded her again. Seeing that Yunwoo was no longer fidgeting, she looked relieved and turned around to get the bowl of medicine on the table. Yunwoo looked at her blandly with her purple eyes and said nothing. Little Leaf sat on the edge of the bed, blew on the medicine in the bowl to cool it down and then sent a spoon of it to Yunwoo's mouth. Heavy odor of medicine rushed at her nose. According to her knowledge of medicine, that was a mild medicine that helped wounds heal and it was very beneficial for feeble patients with major injury. But for Yunwoo, this mild medicinal property was totally ineffective in healing her wounds. Seeing that Yunwoo wouldn't open her mouth, Little Leaf thought that she was afraid of the bitterness. Like coaxing a child, she said, "Elder sister, all good medicine is bitter. If you drink this medicine, I'll buy you some sweetmeat later, okay? Come on. Ah. Open your mouth." Yunwoo frowned, but surprisingly, when she saw the sincerity in the girl's eyes, she didn't have the heart to decline, so her tightly clamped lips slowly parted. Seeing this, Little Leaf delightedly curved her lips in a smile, "Good girl. I'll keep my promise and buy you sweetmeat later." Her coaxing words made Yunwoo somewhat speechless with embarrassment. Upon her remarks, the girl spooned the medicine into her mouth one spoonful after another. She did it so skillfully that it seemed as if she had been doing this on a regular basis. "You must be hungry since you've been in coma for 3 days. Get some more rest. I'll go and make some millet congee for you." Little Leaf tucked Yunwoo in and made sure that she was okay, and then she took the bowl and walked out of the cottage. Before long, Yunwoo heard faint, intermittent footsteps outside the door. It seemed that the kitchen was outside. Lying in this rough bed and hearing the busy footsteps from outside, Yunwoo felt comfortable and relaxed for the first time. She felt as if she could leave all her disguise and burden aside here in this cottage. Though that medicine was ineffective in treating her injuries, she felt a warmth in her body after drinking it. She didn't know whether it was because she was too relaxed, but she unconsciously fell into a deep sleep again. When Yunwoo woke up again, her wounds still didn't heal, but she regained much of her strength along with her spiritual power. After inhaling gently, she mobilized the qi in her dantian and exerted her spiritual power on the inside of her body, trying to check her current physical condition. When she realized what had happened to her body, Yunwoo couldn't help but gasp in astonishment. She had thought that the branch had been pulled out of her body, but unexpectedly, she found that the whole branch had gone into her abdomen and that all the small twigs had intertwined with her flesh, as if it had rooted in her. Damn it! What the hell is that thing? Yunwoo was rather startled. She struggled to sit up and attempted to remove the white cloth that had been wrapped around her abdomen in order to check it. But at this moment the door was slowly opened. However, this time it was not the little girl but an old woman dressed in plain, patched clothing. With white hair and a deeply wrinkled face, she seemed to be in her 70s or 80s. Her kind eyes gave people an inexplicable feeling that she had been through numerous hard times, and people couldn't help feeling pensive on the sight of them. You woke up. You're still very feeble. Just lie in bed, a kind, old voice was heard. After entering the cottage, the old woman went to the table, poured a cup of water, walked to the bedside and sent the cup to Yunwoo's lips. Drink some water. It can help your throat feel better. Looking at the old woman before her, she recalled the previous conversation and realized that this old woman was the one who had saved her. After pausing for a couple of seconds, she stretched out her hand and took the cup. Thank you for saving me, Grandma. She hadn't spoken for days so her voice was somewhat hoarse. The old woman smiled. You seem to be recovering well, kid. Judging from your wounds, you must have been washed downstream by that fast-flowing river in the Magic Beast's forest. Apart from those wounds, there are also several fractures, which I don't know how to heal. In a few days, I'll find a doctor to help you. Judging from the economic conditions of this family, Yunwoo actually could tell that they probably couldn't afford the money to find a doctor to treat her. In fact, with her medical skills and special body, she was capable of treating herself. But on this occasion, Yunwoo nodded at her. Thank you, Grandma. Since you're calling me Grandma, there's no need for you to be too courteous. Your wounds haven't been healing all this time, so I collected some other medicinal herbs. Later, I'll have Little Leaf wash your wounds and apply the medicine. Smiling, Yunwoo nodded. The old woman told her not to move too much and then walked out of the cottage. Yunwoo lay in bed for another 3 days. During the 3 days, those wounds still hadn't healed, but she had handled those fractures by herself, and both her strength and spiritual power had recovered. However, she had been in horror all along because of that eerie branch that had rooted in her abdomen. She had scoured the Soaring Dragon scroll but hadn't found any records of this weird branch. She had meant to extract it by herself several times, but she could feel that every time she thought about removing it from her body, the branch started ramifying and growing more roots in her flesh, as if it possessed consciousness of its own. The pains were unbearable but not intense enough to kill her. After 3 days, Yunwoo gave up attempting to remove it from her body. She was afraid that the roots of that branch would be everywhere in her body if she kept thinking about getting rid of it. After getting out of bed, Yunwoo checked the cloth wrapped around her and then slowly walked out of the cottage. The moment she walked out, she saw that a woman in plain clothes, who was about 30 years old, hastily running in her direction. You're the girl that Grandma Medicine saved, right? I'm Sisterly, living near the entrance of the village. Is Little Leaf home? Sisterly, who had just ran over to the cottage, peered at Yunwoo and was somewhat stunned when she saw her uncanny purple eyes and beautiful looks. But she soon took her eyes off Yunwoo and intended to walk into the cottage. This was a remote valley, and there were barely any others living nearby. Outside the cottage, there was a thatch-roofed shed. A primitive kitchen was on one side of the shed, and there were some medicinal herbs on the other side of it. Further away, there was a fenced yard. Everything was full of rustic charm. She's not in. Over the past 3 days, Yunwoo had known more about the little girl and her grandmother. That little girl was not Grandma Medicine's biological granddaughter. Grandma Medicine found her when she was young and took her in, so she named her Little Leaf. As regards Grandma Medicine, it was said that she was born with no fighting force, and her children were unwilling to support her, so she moved here and lived in this mountain alone. In fact, Yunwoo had always had a feeling that Grandma Medicine's identity was not exactly what she had told her, but Yunwoo hadn't asked any further questions about it. She's not in. Where could she be on this occasion? Something happened to her granny. With a tight frown, Sister Lee looked very anxious. Though Grandma Medicine lived deep in this mountain, all poor residents living nearby relied heavily on her medicine when they got a headache or fever or any other illnesses. Did something happen to her? Yunwoo slightly frowned. Sister Lee also sounded very anxious. Yes. It was right there in the peak hollow. When my husband came back, he said that he saw a couple of fierce-looking men angrily went to Grandma Medicine, and that it seemed as if they wanted to snatch her medicinal herbs. I've already had my husband go there together with other villagers. Where exactly is Little Leaf at this moment? However, before Sister Lee could finish her sentence, Yunwoo turned around and quickly walked towards the path outside the valley. Hey, wait for me. Seeing this, Sister Lee hurriedly followed her. The peak hollow was on the top of a high hill outside the valley. However, she had barely walked out of the valley when she saw that 3 villagers supporting each other were on their way back, blood all over them. What happened, younger brother? Why are you all hurt? Sister Lee, who had been following Yunwoo, yelled in shock and ran forward. However, before she arrived at their side, a man about 20 years old, who was in front of the others, fell to the ground, clutching his bleeding abdomen with a ghastly white face. Hurry! Go and help! Before he could finish his words, he passed out. There were also plenty of wounds on the other 2 villagers. It seemed as if they had been injured by beast claws, and there were also saber cuts on them. When the man fell down, Sister Lee hurriedly ran to him and supported him, but soon her face changed drastically. My God! Younger brother, you lost so much blood. What can I do? Somebody help. In a village as remote as this, there were no other doctors except for Grandma Medicine. At this time, the other 2 villagers also couldn't hold any longer and they both passed out. Sister Lee's yelling soon drew some other villagers to the scene. When the 2 unconscious men's relatives and wives saw them, their faces suddenly changed and they rushed to them. What happened? They lost so much blood. Go and get Grandma Medicine, hurry. However, when those villagers were in panic, Yunwoo frowned. Eventually, she walked forward, crouched down and took those silver needles out of the storage space. Hey, why are you pricking my husband with needles? Seeing that Yunwoo stuck a needle into a villager's body, a woman glared at her and hurriedly tried to remove that silver needle. Don't touch it. If you want him to die, go ahead and pull out the silver needle. After saying this, she stuck another silver needle into another villager's body with the other hand. Before those villagers could react, she crouched down before Sister Lee's younger brother. Under Sister Lee's confused gaze, Yunwoo moved the man's hands aside and tore apart his clothes on his abdomen. There was a deep cut in his abdomen, and they could almost see his intestines and other entrails, which was an exceptionally gory scene. Sister Lee couldn't help gasping and her face instantly went pale. Seeing this, Yunwoo frowned, but she had already blocked the arteries near the wound with silver needles and the bleeding had been stopped temporarily. Don't move him. Let him lie on his back. I'll be back soon. Upon these words, Yunwoo quickly stood up and left. Sister Lee collected herself. Seeing that her younger brother's bleeding had been stopped, she raised her head and looked at Yunwoo who was rapidly walking towards the peak hollow, her eyes full of amazement, but she didn't dare to raise any questions. The moment Yunwu walked out of the sight of those villagers, she gathered wind element around her and shot forward. On the bare top of the steep mountain, the air was filled with the smell of blood. 3 men and a wolf were standing on the edge of a cliff, and there were 5 villagers lying around with wounds caused by wolf claws and swords all over them. They were covered in blood and dying. Judging from the traces around, there had been a fight, but these villagers were no matches for them at all. At this moment, a young man glared at the edge of the cliff, a greedy and venomous look in his eyes. "You goddamn old woman are so stubborn. If you don't give me the Ganoderma right now, I'll cut your hands off. Why are you wasting time talking to her? Just drag her up and take the Ganoderma," another man older than the former one said with a murderous and sinister look in his eyes. A tubby man curved his lips in a smile. "Be careful. There's a tense situation on the border and this 300-year-old Ganoderma is worth a fortune there. Don't break it. Rest assured, Chief." With a greedy smile on his face, the young man crouched down and reached out his hand to grab Grandma Medicine, who was hanging on to a tree on the edge of the cliff. Grandma Medicine was holding a Ganoderma that she had just collected in the other hand, which was also the cause of this disaster. "You devils. Let me go." In those 3 people's eyes, Grandma Medicine's resistance was like that of a shrimp or flea, which made them burst into laugh. The young man dragged Grandma Medicine up, snatched the Ganoderma in her hand and casually tossed her off the cliff. "This kind of old woman is the most hateful." Seeing what the young man had done, the other 2 men burst into laugh. "Little 3, you did it quick and clean. Well done." However, right at this moment, a scream of pain was heard. Looking at the dagger sticking in his arm, the young man abruptly widened his eyes. Almost at the same time, the fat man and the elder of the 3 men mobilized their fighting spirit. "Who is it? Who's so bold and launched a sneak attack on me? You flattered yourselves. You think I need sneak attacks to handle you guys?" An extremely cold voice was heard, as if it was coming from the bottom of the cliff. In the blink of an eye, 2 figures appeared behind them and they didn't know exactly when. When they saw Grandma Medicine, all 3 of them widened their eyes in astonishment and disbelief. Hadn't he thrown that old woman off the cliff just now? How come she appeared behind him after just a fleeting moment? But when the 3 men saw Yunwu's beauty as well as her otherworldly purple eyes, they were all stunned. Though she was dressed in patched gunny clothes which didn't even fit her, her exceptional beauty wasn't reduced a little bit. An amazed and greedy look flashed across the 3 men's eyes. "Who are you, little girl? Don't try to be a busybody. You can't afford to mess with us. You have really seductive looks. Maybe you should consider serving us. I can guarantee you fine food and drinks." With her looks, she could be worth no less than this Ganoderma. "I never expected that there would be a girl with such beauty in this out-of-the-way place." Under the greedy gaze of the 3 men, Yunwu took Grandma Medicine, whose face was pale due to horror, aside and then slowly raised her eyes to look in the direction of the 3 men and a gray wolf. "Is it you who hurt these villagers?" she asked in a bland gentle voice. The fat man curled his lip. "Humph. They hindered our lucrative business. They should be grateful we didn't kill them." The elder of the 3 men looked Yunwu up and down, an evil and greedy look in his eyes. "Chief, since this little girl has come to us herself, we can't just let her go no matter what, can we?" There was also a fevered look in the young man's eyes. Watching Yunwu, he seemed to have forgotten the dagger was still sticking in his arm. "Yeah, Chief. A girl like this is hard to find even if we got the money. I haven't slept with any women for days." Hearing this, the fat man smiled. "Then let's take her with us." The instant his words broke off, the 2 men immediately walked towards Yunwu, naked sexual desire in their eyes. "Wait a minute. Let me be the first one. I can't hold it any longer. I let you do it first last time. This time I should be the first." However, the little disagreement between the 2 men soon paused, along with their approaching footsteps, and they both stared blankly at Yunwu's mysterious purple eyes, seemingly obsessed. Before anybody could react, Yunwoo uncannily appeared before them, grabbed their swords fastened to their belts and stabbed them into their hearts. The horror in their dilated pupils instantly froze in their greedy eyes. The fat man realized what happened. His pupils abruptly contracted while his eyes dilated with a cold look. He stared at the teenage girl who seemed to have no fighting force at all, yet who somehow had managed to jab two swords into the two men's hearts. You killed my brothers? What was going on? He didn't know. In his eyes, his two brothers had just willingly stood there and let her stab their own swords into their hearts. Wasn't this too weird? No matter how beautiful this teenage girl was, by no means would they have let her do this, not to mention that they had seen other beautiful women who were much more charming than her. Yunwoo curved her lips in a smile and her eerie purple eyes darted in his direction. The fat man was stunned and his body suddenly went stiff. But the next second, the fat man's pupils contracted, horror surging in him. Mind control technique? Who are you to the Ouyang family? The Ouyang family? Those guys that I met in the Magic Beasts forest. Yunwoo briefly raised her eyebrows. However, what surprised Yunwoo was that this fat man had managed to free himself from her soul chain in just a second. What do you think who I am to that family? Hearing this rhetorical question, the fat man frowned tightly but asked no more. Eyes glinting with fear, he turned around and intended to retreat with that grey wolf. Swish, the sound of a sharp weapon splitting air was heard. That blood-stained sword stuck into the ground before the fat man. Do you think you can just leave whenever you can after hurting these people? The moment an extremely cold voice was heard, Yunwoo's figure flashed forward. As if having sensed danger, the fat man mobilized his Tier 6 late-stage fighting spirit. Meanwhile, he gave a whistle and the Tier 2 wood wolf beside him instantly revealed its hideous fangs, turned around and pounced on Yunwoo. The corner of Yunwoo's lips curved up. When the wood wolf pounced on her, she rushed forward instead of dodging. With a flip of her hand, she drew a giant knife and swiftly slashed at its head. Roar! The wolf's roar of pain reverberated. Warm blood started splattering around. Almost at the same time, Yunwoo manipulated wind element in the air which then generated suction, gathering the blood of that wood wolf in her palm. With her back to grandma medicine, Yunwoo opened her mouth and sent the beast blood floating above her palm into it. Although her strength had recovered, it was not until her dantian started functioning that Yunwoo discovered that her body, which hadn't absorbed any beast blood for long, was unable to bring her full strength into play, as if it had withered. In addition to her serious injuries, she hadn't drunk any beast blood for a long time, which made both her movements and reflexes much slower than before. However, seeing what Yunwoo had done, that fat man instantly dilated his eyes, which were full of amazement, as if he had seen a monster. You. After swallowing the disgusting blood, Yunwoo briefly curved her lips, her purple eyes fixed on him with a bloodthirsty look in them. Do you want to do it yourself? Or do you want me to do it for you? Stay away from me. For your information, I'm a collateral relative of the Murong family. If you hurt me, the Murong family won't let you get away with it. The fat man backed off. The Murong family? The one in Luo City. Yunwoo had met some members of the Murong family in the Magic Beasts forest, and they hadn't given her a good impression. What Yunwoo didn't know was that Grandma Medicine, who was behind her and pale-faced, gave a violent shiver when she heard the three words, the Murong family. An arrogant and delighted look flashed across the fat man's face as he heard her words. It seems that she heard of the Murong family before. You think there's another Murong family apart from the one in Luo City? Let me tell you something. Not only am I a member of the Murong family, but also my brother-in-law is a young master of the Murong family's offshoot. If you dare to touch me, the Murong family will make sure you pay double the price. Is that so? Yunwoo lifted her eyebrows and slightly curved her lips, looking very beautiful from whichever viewpoints. But the next moment, she raised a saber and slashed at him. With a sudden move of his body, the fat man hurriedly dodged sideways, but he was not quick enough and the tip of the blade still left a deep cut in his arm. You can actually penetrate my tier 6 defense? The fat man's heart lurched. He watched the bloody cut in his arm, eyes full of disbelief. Yunwoo didn't answer him, killing intent appearing in her purple eyes. No matter who these people were, all of them had to be eliminated. Though she had been wounded, her power was more than enough to handle a tier 6 middle stage opponent. However, when Yunwoo was about to kill that fat man, Grandma Medicine's voice came from behind, "Don't kill him." Yunwoo paused. The fat man took advantage of this opportunity, abruptly leaped off the cliff and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Looking down at the bottom of the cliff, Yunwoo frowned tightly. If she went after him right now, she could surely catch up with him, but considering Grandma Medicine's concern and those injured villagers, she eventually gave up pursuing him. Letting that fat man go would undoubtedly bring her trouble in the future. But, those were future stories. "Granny, how do you feel?" Yunwoo turned around, looked at Grandma Medicine's pale face and asked in concern. As regards why she had tried to stop her, she didn't ask. This Grandma Medicine must have a past that she preferred to remain secret from others. It was just that she was not willing to tell others about it, so Yunwoo wouldn't ask her. Grandma Medicine had saved her life, so she was her benefactor. Repaying every favor that others had done her was Yunwoo's principle. "I'm fine. I just sprained my ankle. Help me go there and check those villagers." However, at this moment, they saw many other villagers quickly coming up from the steep path with sticks or shovels in their hands. Those villagers must have departed soon after Yunwoo, but Yunwoo had utilized wind element and leaped right up the hill, which had saved her a lot of time. "Grandma Medicine, are you hurt?" But when they arrived and saw the scene, they were all stunned. The wood wolf had been halved and the two villains had been stabbed in their hearts, while the teenager and the old woman were standing at the side, which was in stark contrast to the bloody scene. However, these were villagers of great simplicity. Instead of becoming suspicious of how this had happened, they just hurriedly carried those wounded villagers back to the village. "Grandma Medicine, what should we do? It will take us a full day to go to the city and get a doctor here. Grandma Medicine, please come and take a look at my dad." Those injured villagers had been carried back to the village. All of them were covered in blood and half-dead. Everybody who saw them couldn't help yelling in shock. Anxiety and concern pervaded the whole small village. Grandma Medicine had sprained her ankle, but the moment she came back, instead of having a rest, she had someone support her and hobbled towards those injured villagers. Seeing this, Yunwoo couldn't help frowning. Although Grandma Medicine had some knowledge of medicinal herbs and elementary medical skills, which enabled her to handle wounds that were not serious, there were 8 injured villagers in total and they were all badly hurt. If treated only with medicinal herbs, their chances of survival would be greatly reduced. In fact, Yunwoo had been trained to be a top killer in her last incarnation, so she had got rid of her mercy a long time ago. Repaying favors was the best she could do. But when she saw these villagers whose nature was of pure simplicity, she regained part of her charity. She walked towards Sister Lee's younger brother who had suffered the worst injury among the 8 villagers. "If you want to save him, go get me some needles and threads." Eyes full of tears, Sister Lee was stunned when she heard Yunwoo's words. Both her younger brother and her husband were hurt and she was extremely anxious, but there was nothing she could do. However, when she heard Yunwoo's words, she was stunned for a few seconds, but soon she collected herself. "You can help them. I'll go find these things right now." After Sister Lee ran out, Yunwoo asked Grandma Medicine to tell the village chief to have all the other villagers leave. Grandma Medicine was a little confused about what Yunwoo was doing, but when she saw that Yunwoo stopped those injured villagers bleeding by using silver needles, a flicker of surprise flashed across the bottom of her eyes. After those villagers left, Sister Lee came back with needles and threads. There were no disinfectant and other things that were available in modern society, and Grandma Medicine's medicinal herbs came in very handy. When everything was ready, Yunwoo didn't ask Sister Lee to leave. Instead, she told her to assist Grandma Medicine in stabilizing the other injured villagers' condition. However, when they saw the medical treatment that Yunwoo performed next, Grandma Medicine and Sister Lee were almost transfixed with shock. Yunwoo stitched those damaged entrails up with a small needle and threads, and then she did the same thing to their muscles, skins. Her movements were quick, clean and very accurate, and the only words that was suitable to describe them was divine. It looked like a simple thing to do, but sewing those wounds alone took her 2 hours. When this operation was completed, Yunwoo applied Grandma Medicine's medicine for trauma to those wounds and simply bandaged them up. Monitor his temperature tonight. If his conditions are stable tonight, you can remove those stitches half a month later, and then in another month, he should fully recover. After giving Sister Lee these tips, Yunwoo walked towards another patient. Some deep cuts were relatively difficult to deal with, but Yunwoo managed to handle them rather smoothly. It was just that there were 8 injured villagers, and when she completed the last operation, a day and a night had passed. Apart from Sister Lee and Grandma Medicine, there was also a couple of other villagers standing on the side. Watching Yunwoo in gratitude and reverence, they were cautious even when they breathed. When the last operation was completed, Yunwoo's face looked a little tired and her hands were sore and numb. All right. Pay attention to their temperature during the next day. If their temperature rises, use the medicine that Grandma Medicine prepared on them. In addition, these people who have just undergone operations must stay in a clean environment. Try not to let people go in and out of this room frequently in the next few days. She told them to do this to prevent potential infection. But in this world, nobody could understand those modern terms, so Yunwoo didn't bother. Thank you, girl. Thank you so much. Your skills are like that of God. Eyes Red, a relative of one of those wounded villagers, nearly knelt down and kowtowed to Yunwoo. There had been too many similar occasions during the past day, and Yunwoo was too tired to reply to them. Take good care of them. I'll go back and have some rest. Although she had drunk some beast blood in Peak Hollow, it was not even close to enough. She had been highly concentrated for a day and a night without any sleep, which made her body feebler and feebler. Her wounds, in particular, still hadn't healed. Every step she took pulled the wound and thus resulted in dull pains. It seemed that she had to go to the forest and get some beast blood first. Amid those villagers' thankful words, under their reverential gaze, Yunwoo walked out of that spacious hut and quickly walked towards the valley. However, shortly after Yunwoo left, a villager hurriedly came back from outside the village. Grandma Medicine, this is bad. The villager called Grandma Medicine out of the hut and hastily handed the patched back bag to her. This is Little Leaf's bag. I found it near the entrance of the mountain. There's blood on it. I looked everywhere but didn't find Little Leaf. What did you just say? They both were killed. In the courtyard of the offshoot of the Murong family, an angry and slightly high voice was heard. With a livid face, Thousand Murong stared at the fat man who had just returned like a drenched rat. Back then when they departed, there were 3 men and a wolf, but now only 1 man came back. No wonder his face changed. A weird teenage girl who drank blood and knew mind control technique? She must have some kind of relations with the one behind the Ouyang family. But if this is true, how come she appeared in a remote village? Should I report this to the Lord? But if he reported this to the Lord of the city, people would surely find out that he had been sending people out to collect medicinal materials to resell them. In that case, he would have to go through more unnecessary trouble. Brother-in-law, I took back a girl from that small village on my way back. Should we sound her out first and find out who that teenage girl is? Seeing that Thousand Murong was contemplating, the fat man hurried said. This trip had cost them 2 men and a well-trained Tier 2 wood wolf, which was a heavy loss. When the fat man was on the run, he took a little girl on his way back, thinking that he could at least vent his anger on her even if Thousand Murong didn't need her. Now that you've already brought her back, go figure it out and then report to me. Thousand Murong seemed to be in a bad mood, but he still waved his hand and said this. The fat man said in a low voice, "Brother-in-law, we can't let my two brothers die in vain. Please help me avenge their deaths." With Tier 6 late-stage strength, he had still got beaten up, which made him feel extremely bitter and angry. He was determined to get his revenge. "I got it. I'll leave this up to you to use your discretion. But be sure to identify that teenage girl you talked about." A meaningful look crossed Thousand Murong's deep eyes. A callous look in his eyes, the fat man curved his lips in a smile and nodded, "Rest assured and wait for my good news." The mountainsides in the valley were not very steep, but there were only one or two low-level herbivorous magic beasts apart from some rabbits and pheasants in this part of the forest. Common beast blood of low-level magic beasts was barely helpful in improving her current physical conditions. As a result, Yunwu got over several hills and headed for denser part of the forest. Yunwu was not familiar with the roads here, so she left some marks along the way so that she would be able to retrace her steps back to the valley. However, she hadn't expected that these marks would lead a big, unnecessary trouble to herself afterwards. Shortly after Yunwu entered a dense forest, she finally caught sight of some traces of magic beasts. However, the magic beasts of the highest level that she had encountered on a circular walk was around Tier 2. Instead of going further, Yunwu picked a wild leopard in middle stage of Tier 2. Though her body was out of condition, her movements were quick and clean, and she struck like greased lightning. She raised her saber, gave a slash and killed it with one blow. When Yunwu picked herself up from that wild leopard, she was half full. Her lips were covered in blood and a big part of her coat was also blood-stained, the smell of which disgusted her. But she felt warmer, and gradually, it seemed as if those seemingly withered meridians were beginning to revive. Those wounds on her body were also becoming itchy. Yunwu knew that was her wounds slowly healing. Seemingly, as long as her body wasn't resurrected, she was really like a walking corpse relying on beast blood to survive. Out of no specific reason, Yunwu felt somewhat anxious deep down in her heart. She disliked this feeling, since it was too passive, and it also led to an unduly intense sense of insecurity. At this moment, she couldn't help thinking of that man who had jumped off the cliff into the torrent with her, and who had gone missing. Where was he exactly? Rustle. The sound of grass rustling in some kind of wind was heard. Yunwu squinted. With a sudden move of her body, she flashed into a big tree in the twinkling of an eye. Right at this moment, the figures of several assassins in black rushed over through the grass in a quick and covert manner. "What a strong smell of blood," one of those assassins said in a deep voice. The other assassin's eyes had already flashed in the direction of the wild leopard's body. It died a short while ago. This smell of blood covered all the other odors. "We lost the target's direction. What do we do now?" "We split up. The master ordered us to take the target's head back, whatever the cost." The instant the conversation ended, those assassins' figures split up and flashed in several different directions. On the tree trunk, Yunwu, who had been keeping his chi hidden, couldn't help but lift her eyebrows after those assassins left. Tier 7 assassins. Who were they after? Of course, this curious thought merely flashed across Yunwu's mind and soon disappeared. Curiosity killed the cat, she knew this very well. But at this moment, swish, the sound of something sharp splitting the air was heard. A figure leaped down from a tree with dense foliage, pressing the blade of a sword against Yunwu's neck, while Yunwu's dagger pointed at the man's heart. "Who are you?" His deep, magnetic voice was tinged with coldness and solemnity. He was a handsome young man about 20 years old, dressed in a brocade robe with the pattern of a flying black dragon on it. He was staring squarely at Yunwu's purple eyes. Like that of a hawk, his eyes were piercingly black, and the look in them was a mixture of condescension and nobility, but it was also extremely icy. If Long Qingxie was a man like a yokai, then this man was a domineering and callous man. However, Yunwoo found his unduly piercing black eyes somewhat repellent. I think my identity doesn't concern you, does it? Yunwoo slightly curved her lips, but her voice was extremely apathetic. The man started looking Yunwoo up and down with his piercing eyes. Her hair was tied behind her head in a casual way, revealing her fine features, especially her charming purple eyes. But what she was wearing was patched gunny clothes, as if she was trying to hide her beauty, but her attire failed to conceal her intrinsic unruliness. A short while ago, when she killed that Tier 2 wild leopard, he had flashed into the top of this tree after finding this place by following those special marks. He hadn't expected that he would witness the scene of her lying on the wild leopard's body drinking its blood. Of course he was astonished, but he was more curious. After those assassins who had been pursuing him to kill him left, he had meant to quietly approach her. Unexpectedly, she detected him the moment he made his move, and now he ended up in this situation. During the past 21 years of his lived life, no woman had ever treated him like this. What's your name? The man's black eyes were still piercing, but he seemed to have an aggressive momentum. He stared at her with exceptionally deep eyes. Yunwoo frowned. His gaze gave her goosebumps, which was not a pleasant feeling. But in the blink of an eye, she slightly curved her lips in a half-smile. Are you pretty used to put a sword to a girl's throat before asking her name? Stunned, the man looked down at Yunwoo, whose lips had curved into a smile. He lifted his eyebrows and put away his sword after a couple of seconds' silence. Can you tell me now? Yunwoo smiled, but the next second, an aggressive look flashed across her eyes and she swung her dagger at him. The man narrowed his piercing eyes with a frown, gave a leap and dodged aside quickly. But at this moment, Yunwoo had leaped down the tree and intended to leave. You want to leave without answering my question? Swish, he stabbed the sword at her. With a sudden move of her body, Yunwoo swiftly dodged aside, but she discovered that the man's speed was extremely fast. There had been several occasions when she nearly got hit by him. Wind attribute, middle stage of Tier 7. This man was merely in his early 20s, but his strength was already in middle stage of Tier 7. His endowments were far more superior than that of those so-called geniuses. Among all the people she had met so far, this man was the one with the best talent apart from that yokai like Long Qingxie. However, that man was just as surprised as Yunwoo was. Early stage of Tier 7. This teenage girl, who was seemingly 15 or 16 years old, was actually an early stage of Tier 7. What kind of talent was this? The man watched the beautiful agile teenage girl in front of him, the look in his eyes becoming deeper. He stopped attacking and stared squarely at Yunwoo. If you don't want to disclose your name, at least tell me your surname. Surname? Wasn't telling him her surname synonymous with telling him her background? Yunwoo raised her eyes and glanced at that man. Judging from his attire and temperament, this man must come from an unusual background. Find out about it yourself if you think you can. The moment her apathetic voice died away, Yunwoo turned around and intended to leave, since she had sensed that those assassins that had left just now were on their way back here. The man had also detected this. His clamped lips suddenly curved up. He put away the sword in his hand, and with a sudden move of his body, he flashed to Yunwoo, who was about to leave, and grabbed Yunwoo's hand. Like lightning, he dragged her and shot forward. All this happened before Yunwoo could react it, and when she realized what had happened, an assassin had come at her head-on. Damn it! Yunwoo attempted to draw her hand back from that man's grip, but the assassin was stabbing a sword at her from the front. Out of instincts, she moved sideways and meanwhile swung her dagger backwards across that assassin's throat. Blood gushed out. There was still disbelief in the assassin's eyes when his body fell down to the ground. How quick your moves are. Did you practice assassin's skills? The man who was holding Yunwoo's hand stared at Yunwoo with an exceptionally deep look in his eyes. Killing intent appeared in Yunwoo's purple eyes. She swung her dagger at the man's hand with which he was grabbing hers. The man squinted with a dangerous look in his eyes, but he still loosened his grip and quickly flashed aside. No woman has ever dared to swing a knife at me again and again, his deep voice went icy. Yunwoo curved her lips in a sardonic smile, next time, I won't just swing a knife at you. I'll kill you. An amused look crossed the bottom of the man's eyes, you really know how to bluff. As long as you tell me your name, I'll let you go. Otherwise, you'll have to stay here with me. You think you can stop me leaving? Yunwoo curved her lips in a smile which was piercingly cold. Maybe others can't, but I, Zhou Feiyu, never let things that catches my fancy slip away. These confident words were uttered in a highly domineering tone. But hearing these words, Yunwoo sneered secretly. Things? Even if she was a thing, he was in no place to be interested in her, not to mention that she was not a thing. Is that so? Yunwoo squinted her purple eyes with a smile. Abruptly, in less than the blink of an eye's time, a rapid blur flashed past Zhou Feiyu at a weirdly fast speed along with a gleam of cold light. Dodge? He merely managed to turn his head aside and didn't even have the chance to dodge. The dagger in Yunwoo's hand had been stuck into the tree behind him and a thin bloody line appeared on his handsome face. The distinct sting was like a reminder of what had just happened. Don't overestimate yourself. If I intend to kill you, I can do it a lot quicker than those who are after you can. Yunwoo's voice was extremely cold. After giving a cold glimpse at him, she turned around and left without waiting for him to make any responses. This time Zhou Feiyu didn't pursue her. Watching Yunwoo's receding figure, he raised his hand and stroked away that blood bead on his cheek with the fingertip of one of his long fingers. The corner of his lips slowly curved in an amused smile, so interesting. But in his deep black eyes, a ferocious look flickered. There had never been anything that he, Zhou Feiyu, failed to get. After getting far away from that man, Yunwoo didn't return immediately. She hunted another magic beast and consumed some of its blood along with holy grass. Grandma Medicine's medicinal herbs were not very effective in healing her wounds, so Yunwoo collected some other medicinal herbs and changed the dressing. After doing all this, Yunwoo followed those marks and retraced her steps back to that remote valley. When she returned to that cottage, it was already dark, but she discovered that both Grandma Medicine and Little Leaf were not in. She thought that they were in the village taking care of those injured villagers, so she didn't try to look for them. The next day. With the efficacy of beast blood and holy grass in addition to practicing qi circulation for a night, Yunwoo felt that her meridians had fully recovered, and her wounds had been healing quickly. The wounds on her body should heal completely in 2 days. As regards that branch in her abdomen, it didn't penetrate her dantian but rooted around her dantian. Elder White, who was in the necklace around her neck, had been quiet all along ever since she woke up. Everything seemed so weird. But since she couldn't figure these things out, Yunwoo just left them aside. She stood up, stretched out a little and intended to go and check those villagers that got injured yesterday. But the moment she walked out of the cottage, she saw Sister Lee hurriedly ran in her direction again. Where were you yesterday, girl? Something happened. Something happened? With those drugs prepared by Grandma Medicine, nothing serious could have happened even if those patients had caught fever after operation. As soon as Sister Lee arrived, she grabbed Yunwoo's hand and hastily walked towards the cottage, explaining, Little Leaf is missing. The fat man who injured those villagers yesterday has come back to our village with more men. They struck everybody they saw, and they took Grandma Medicine away. Right now, they're heading for this cottage. Hurry. Go inside and don't come out no matter what happens. However, Sister Lee had hardly taken Yunwoo to the door when they saw a couple of figures rapidly shooting towards them with whooshing sounds. In a short while, the fat man with cold eyes arrived at the cottage, followed by 5 guards. Where are you planning to hide? The fat man's sinister voice was heard. Sister Lee's face changed. Instantly, she moved in front of Yunwoo, as if she wanted to hide her. What do you want? In a remote village like this, no residents here had ever learned any kung fu. In front of these warriors, they were literally powerless to defend themselves. But Sister Lee still steeled herself and ventured into raising her eyes to look the fat man and the others in the eye. Yunwoo knew she was trying to protect her. The fat man's face was full of impatience. "You village woman, get away from here if you still have some senses. Don't try to be a busybody." Upon these words, he raised his hand and ordered the 5 guards beside him, "Go. Take her." Immediately, the 5 guards walked towards Yunwoo. Like a hen protecting a chick, Sister Lee tried to stop them. "What are you doing? How dare you do this in public?" Before she could finish her sentence, a guard impatiently grabbed Sister Lee and intended to throw her away. However, snap, the sound of a wrist breaking was heard. Ah! The guard let out a shriek of pain and his face went somewhat pale. Due to the sharp pain in the wrist, he loosened his grip on Sister Lee. Yunwoo's purple eyes flashed in the direction of those men with a bland look. She was holding the guard's wrist with her small hand in a relaxed manner, but the wrist had been twisted into a weird shape. "I'm the one you want. What's the point of hurting innocent people?" The instant her bland voice died away, Yunwoo casually moved her hand and the guard's body was violently thrown away, giving a somersault along the way. It seemed as if she had just thrown away a piece of rag. The other 4 guards widened their eyes, looking at that seemingly petite teenage girl in surprise. That guard was a warrior in late stage of Tier 6, but he had got thrown away by her in such a casual way. The fat man's pupils secretly contracted, but the look on his face went even colder. These guards had been specially selected to deal with that mysterious teenage girl. Unexpectedly, the fight had barely started when one of them was thrown away. "What are you standing there for? Go together and take her." The fat man seemed to have been provoked, his face full of ferocity. Hearing this, the other 4 people mobilized their fighting spirit and stretched out their hands to grab Yunwoo. It seemed that they intended to capture her. Yunwoo slightly squinted. When the 4 guards were reaching out their hands to grab her, her figure uncannily vanished into thin air. Having missed the target, the 4 guards were stunned, eyes gleaming with astonishment. Where was her? The fat man also widened his eyes and it seemed as if he was about to rub them. What happened? How did she disappear? All of a sudden. "Now that you've come here and found me, I'll take your lives." A cold, calm voice came out of thin air and passed the fat man's ears. The fat man's eyes went vigilant. He subconsciously flashed forward, whipped out his sword and slashed at the source of the voice. But the next second, a gleam of cold light flashed past the fat man's eyes. All movements seemed to be immobilized at this instant. Eyes dilated, the fat man stared at Yunwoo who had just stabbed a dagger through his throat. His eyes were full of horror and disbelief. He was in Tier 6, but before he could make a single move, he was. "Your lordship." Seeing that the fat man had been killed, the other 4 guards were stunned, but soon their pupils contracted, and with that they instantly mobilized their fighting spirit and shot towards Yunwoo. This time, all the 4 guards were covered in killing aura. Yunwoo's lips curved in a grim smile, an intense killing aura surging out of her. She never showed mercy to those who wanted her dead. After a sudden, phantom move of her figure, flashes of cold light were seen. She raised her hand and swung the dagger at her opponents, killing each of them with one blow. When all movements stopped, the 4 guards were still in their offensive stances, but blood were gushing out of their throat, astonishment freezing in their eyes. Was she an assassin or a warrior? 4 guards in peak stage of Tier 6. She had cut their throats before they could make a single move. The last guard with a broken wrist widened his eyes which were full of horror. "Shoo!" A gasp was heard, and Yunwoo didn't know whether it had come from Sister Lee's mouth or her dilated eyes in which astonishment glinted. She must have been shocked to see Yunwoo's moves, since she hadn't expected that Yunwoo's kung fu was so good. "Sister Lee, find some villagers to deal with these bodies. I'll go get grandma medicine back." Yunwoo looked at Sister Lee and said. Then she grabbed that fat man's body, threw it to that guard who was still alive and said coldly, "Carry this and lead the way." The guard raised his head and looked at the teenage girl in front of him, eyes full of horror. But he didn't dare to resist, because he could distinctly feel that if he disobeyed her or tried to play any tricks, he would end up just like those bodies. In the mansion of the Murong family's offshoot in the Luoyang city. The figure of a guard rushed in hurriedly as if he had something extremely urgent to report. Thousand Murong, who was teasing a caged little bird, frowned with a cold look of discontent flashing across the bottom of his piercing eyes. Young master. Something bad happened. Elder Uncle Go got killed. The one who killed Elder Uncle is coming. The guard reported, his breath coming in short gasps due to the unduly hasty rush he had made. The elder uncle he mentioned was the fat man. Hearing this, Thousand Murong, who had been teasing a little bird, was transfixed with shock. Elder uncle was killed. With that his piercing eyes glinted coldly. Where is that person? Right outside the gate. Elder uncle's body was brought back and drew many commoners here. Thousand Murong squinted with a dangerous look, his face sepulchral. Go invite that person inside. Don't inform young mistress yet. Young mistress has heard the news and headed for the gateway. The sepulchral look on Thousand Murong's face made the guard quiver involuntarily. He knew that the young master had a widespread reputation for his unpredictable temper. Any minor mistake could cost his life. Thousand Murong's eyes darkened as he heard the guard's words. There was an air of coldness about him, which people could distinctly feel from far away. Lucky for him, the young master turned around with a twitch of his arm and headed for the gate. The East Avenue of the Luoyang city was one of the busiest streets in the city. And the mansion of the Murong family's offshoot was located at the most prominent position on the East Avenue. At this moment, a pretty figure was standing at the gateway of the mansion of the Murong family's offshoot. That was a teenage girl about 15 or 16 years old, dressed in gunny clothes. However, that teenage girl was giving off a cold air and looked dangerously callous, the fat man's body beneath her foot. Beside her, there was a guard with a twisted wrist lying on the ground. Judging by the clothes he was wearing, he was the Murong family's guard. All those who passed by gave an amazed glimpse at Petite Yunwu, and many lookers-on were whispering to each other. Isn't that the elder uncle of the young master of the Murong family's offshoot? What happened? I heard that the elder uncle is a tier 6 warrior. How come he's lying on the ground beneath that girl's foot? No. Look. It seems that the elder uncle is dead. There's a bloody hole in his neck. Dead? No way. Who dares to hurt members of the Murong family in Luoyang city? People's discussion in muted voices were heard. There were 4 guards standing on the 2 sides of the gate. Faces sullen, they were holding unsheathed swords and looking at that teenage girl vigilantly, but none of them dared step forward. Because that guard lying on the ground was in peak stage of tier 6, but she had just knocked him out with her bare hands. And she was stamping on the elder uncle's body. Not long after a guard went inside to report, a gloriously clothed female quickly walked out of the mansion with an angry face, followed by 2 guards. Before those guards could speak, someone thundered. Who killed my elder brother exactly? There was an intense killing intent in the furious reprimand. The voice was from a female about 27 or 28 years old who was dressed in clothes made of leno and brocade. She had a well-featured face, but all those jewels on her made her seem somewhat vulgar. At this moment there was a sepulchral look on her face. When she saw the figure of the fat man who was beneath the teenage girl's foot, Luo Shanshan abruptly widened her eyes, fury welling up inside her. She glared at Yunwu. Go kill her. Hearing the order, the 2 guards behind her immediately whipped out their sabers, rushed forward and slashed at Yunwu. Their movements were agile and decisive. They were tier 5 warriors. Seeing this, those lookers-on exclaimed in amazement. That teenage girl is too reckless. She should never have messed with the Murong family. She's still so young. What a pity. That's true. She should have known the status of the Murong family in Luoyang City. However, the sound of the mumbling hadn't died away yet. Yunwu's cold eyes swept through the two guards, and with that her figure turned into a rapid blur and dodged aside. The two guards missed hitting the target. Before the two guards could react, a mysterious power suddenly grabbed them and threw them away. Bang, bang. With two thuds, the two guards violently impacted on the stone lion statue in front of the gate. Pooh! Both guards spat blood and seemed unable to stand up anytime soon. Passers-by who were looking on couldn't help letting out exclamation of shock. Those were Tier 5 warriors. Luo Shanshan's face instantly changed, her pupils abruptly contracted. It seems that you're not bad. Then today, I'll take your life myself. She pulled a whip off her waist with a burst of Tier 6 early-stage Cyan fighting spirit and ferociously waved her wrist. Swish, the whip split the air. The long whip shot at Yunwu like a bloodthirsty python. Killing aura pervaded the space. There was no doubt that this whip blow was powerful enough to smash a person into pieces. Yunwu coldly curved her lips. But this time she didn't dodge but stretched out her small white hand and squarely grabbed the tail of the whip. Under the astonished gaze of those lookers-on, she tightened her grip and abruptly pulled the whip backwards. Luo Shanshan, who was holding the other end of the whip, hadn't reacted yet when she lost her balance and was pulled forward along with her whip. However, right at this moment when she was about to fall and embarrass herself, Luo Shanshan quickly somersaulted, drew a dagger out of thin air and conveniently thrust it at Yunwu. Yunwu pinched the coming blade with two fingers without even glancing at the dagger out of the corner of her eye. A look of amazement flashed across Luo Shanshan's eyes. At this very moment, Yunwu's fighting spirit secretly surged out. With a lateral movement of her fingers, she quickly pushed the blade in Luo Shanshan's hand towards her neck. Horror surged through Luo Shanshan. She was in early stage of Tier 7. How was this possible? She was 15 or 16 years old at the most. Amazed, Luo Shanshan quickly backed off and dodged the blow in a somewhat embarrassing way, but the dagger in her hand snapped under Yun Wu's uncanny power. At this moment, the street which originally had been uproarious instantly went quiet. That blow was given by someone in early stage of Tier 6 and with Cyan rank endowment, but that teenage girl not only parried it but also managed to fight back head-on and get the upper hand. Who's that teenage girl exactly? What level is she at? At this very moment. Who came to Murong family to court trouble? A middle-aged steward in a grey robe led a group of guards out of the gate with thick killing aura about them. On the sight of them, Luo Shanshan immediately pointed towards Yunwu, a killing intent in her eyes which were full of hatred. Steward Feng, you've come just in time. Kill this woman who murdered my elder brother. The leader of guards, Steward Feng, was a top kung fu expert of the Murong family and he was in middle stage of Tier 7. And those guards under his command were all at Tier 5 or Tier 6. Their power should be more than enough to handle an opponent in early stage of Tier 7. Hearing this, Steward Feng darted a glance at the elder uncle's body and that guard lying on the ground and his face abruptly darkened. Glaring at Yunwu, he reprimanded, "How dare you? You murdered a member of the Murong family. You're courting death." Yunwu glanced at him flatly and ignored his words. Seeing that she was acting as if he didn't exist, Steward Feng instantly went furious. In a deep voice, he said angrily, "What are you standing there for? Go kill that arrogant little bitch and feed her body to wild dogs. She dares to mess with members of the Murong family. She won't be able to atone for her crime even if she dies 10 times. Hearing his words, the 12 guards behind him immediately mobilized their fighting spirit, whipped out their swords and hurtled towards Yunwu. Yunwu's lips slowly curved up with a murderous look flashing across the bottom of her eyes. She wielded the whip in her hand and swung it at those guards with momentum like that of a tornado. Bang! A loud bang like the sound of thunder was heard. Those lookers-on merely heard the bang. When they collected themselves, they were all transfixed with shock by the scene in front of them. Shoo! Faint sounds of gasps came from the crowd. One whip blow, that was just one whip blow. There was a straight crack on the ground from Yunwoo to the gate of the Murong mansion, as if the ground had just been slit open by a huge saber. The 12 guards, who originally had been charging at her, were hit by the lateral whip blow. Fighting spirit of the two sides violently impacted on each other and broken apart. Pooh! Something sweet welled up to their throats and each of them spat a mouthful of blood in unison. That was Tier 7 early stage fighting spirit. This teenage girl was actually an early stage of Tier 7. Shock. Maybe that was fear. Sharp pain spread across their bodies, cold sweat pouring off them. It seemed as if Yunwoo had just casually gave a whip blow, and she hadn't even moved her trunk. There was a cold, bland look tinged with contempt at the bottom of her eyes, along with a faint killing intent. She had made up her mind that she wouldn't try to conceal her strength today. Instead, she would make a scene and cause a sensation in Luoyang City. She's so powerful. Who's that girl? Which family is she from? She's so tough. At such a young age, she managed to defeat a team of guards of the Murong mansion with just one whip blow. I think she's not from Luo City. Otherwise, why haven't I never heard of a girl as tough as her before? After gasping, those lookers-on repeatedly exclaimed in astonishment. They were giving Yunwoo different gaze. The look in a lot of people's eyes became fevered. Steward Feng's face was extremely sepulchral, but the intention to kill in his eyes was growing increasingly intenser. How high the Murong mansion's status was in the Luo City? Everybody knew the answer. But today, they were under dire provocation. This little girl had inflicted a crushing defeat on 12 of their guards. As the leader of these guards, he felt that this was an unbearable humiliation. Luo Shanshan, who had been standing at the side, also seemed to haven't expected that this teenage girl would be so powerful. Who are you? Where do you live? Luo Shanshan looked at Yunwoo with a cold look in her eyes and asked. Since her kung fu was so good, then she was surely from some unusual background. But surprisingly, judging from the gunny clothes without any jewel decoration she was wearing, she seemed to be from a poor family. Maybe she was from some famous family that was not doing well. If that was the case, she could temporarily subdue her anger and recruit this girl to the Murong family. When the occasion arose in the future, she could still kill her. Steward Feng shared Luo Shanshan's opinion. Little girl, people of Murong Mansion are not unreasonable. I can see that your kung fu is pretty good. Murong Mansion is always eager to recruit talents. If you're willing to join us, then we can pretend that all these things have never happened. Although the color of this little girl's talent was still unknown, she was already an early stage of Tier 7 at such a young age, so naturally her talent must be pretty good. If they managed to recruit her, then sooner or later they would be able to get revenge for the humiliation that she had inflicted on them today. Yunwoo kept silent. After he said those words, Steward Feng didn't receive any response for quite a while. Arms crossed over her chest, Yunwoo gave a flat glance at him with an arrogant look in her purple eyes, as if she was sneering at and disdaining him. Recruit me? Do they actually think they're gods? He had said those words in a haughty tone, as if he was doing her a favor. Yunwoo couldn't help feeling that he was ridiculous. She knew what they were up to. She had killed that fat man as well as those senior guards of the Murong mansion. How could they let this go? The indifferent, sarcastic look in Yunwoo's eyes made Steward Feng's face went unusually livid. He felt humiliated, as if he had been slapped on the face. It seems that you are the kind of person who won't shed tears before seeing the coffin. I think I'll have to teach you a lesson so that you may know how pathetic your strength is. After saying that, he whipped out his saber and flashed towards Yunwoo like lightning. Having seen Yunwoo's moves just now, Steward Feng didn't launch an attack on her frontally. Instead, he swished past her to distract the opponent and then slashed at Yunwu violently. His blow was totally ruthlessly. Yunwu curved her lips in a cold smile and dodged aside with a weird swish of her figure. Clang! The big saber hit the solid ground hard and a crack appeared, indicating how potent the power was. However, at this moment, the long whip on the ground abruptly coiled up like a ferocious python with giant, fanged mouth. The whip fiercely hit Steward Feng's body head-on. Pala! The sound of a whip hitting a human body was heard. Instantly, his gray robe was slit open and a bloody mark was seen by everybody present. Steward Feng felt a burning pain and his face instantly went livid with a surprised look on it. What was going on? When Steward Feng lowered his head and saw that bloody wound caused by the whip, his face became hideous. He was in middle stage of Tier 7. How could this girl in early stage of Tier 7 breach his defense and hurt him? However, right at this moment, Luo Shanshan suddenly swished forward and stood in front of Yunwu at a position not far away from her. Little girl, I'm the young mistress of the Murong family's offshoot. My name is Luo Shanshan. Luo Shanshan didn't launch another attack and the ferocity and anger on her face had disappeared. With a smile, she looked at Yunwu. Her current look could even be deemed unusually amiable. Hearing her voice, Yunwu raised her head and briefly met Luo Shanshan's eyes. All of a sudden, Yunwu felt a shiver from head to toe. Soul Chain. Luo Shanshan's black eyes looked fixedly into Yunwu's purple pupils, as if she was trying to enter Yunwu's soul to shackle it. At this moment, those lookers-on who had been spectating the fight couldn't help cast their eyes towards Luo Shanshan. A lot of them who were looking at Luo Shanshan instantly felt dizzy. Suddenly, someone among the crowd yelled. Don't look at young Mistress Murong's eyes. I heard that she used to practice soul chain technique. If anybody looks at her eyes, his soul will be restricted, and he will be immobilized and powerless to defend against attacks. What? Soul chain technique? No wonder I felt dizzy just now. No way. That's unreasonably powerful. That little girl is doomed. Exclamation of amazement rippled through the crowds. Before long, nobody present dared look at Luo Shanshan's eyes. Including that Steward Feng. That was why he hadn't noticed that when Luo Shanshan's originally haughty eyes met Yunwu's purple ones, the confusion and surprise on her face gradually changed into horror and eventually into stiff woodenness. Soul chain technique. But it was only the lowest level of the mind control technique. Steward Feng saw that Yunwu was actually staring transfixed at Luo Shanshan as if she had become a fool. A murderous look flashed across the bottom of his sepulchral eyes. In the blink of an eye, his fighting spirit engulfed the big saber and he violently gave a lateral hack at Yunwu. This deed was absolutely despicable. Swish. Pala. What kind of move could be deemed unpredictable? What kind of move could be deemed unexpected? Answers to both were displayed in the scene happened in this moment. Yunwu was still staring at Luo Shanshan with her purple eyes. However, the whip in her hand was laterally swung at Steward Feng with wind blades at lightning speed. People merely heard the sound of a whip hitting a human body and with that they saw Steward Feng abruptly knelt down to the ground with a thud. Hardly anybody saw clearly what had happened. All attacks stopped. Sweat beads as big as beans were pouring off Steward Feng's forehead. He disbelievingly looked at his legs which seemed to have been slashed numerous times, his face hideous and twisted. He had clearly felt that he had been hit by only one whip blow, but when he reacted, he found that both his feet were covered in blood. He felt as if all his foot tendons had been severed, leaving him powerless to stand up. How did this happen? We've had enough fun. Now let's get down to business. An apathetic voice was heard. Steward Feng's herd inexplicably lurched. At this moment, Yunwu finally withdrew her gaze, a faint smile on her face, but abruptly, a burst of killing aura surged out of her and pervaded the whole place as if it was tangible. Horror surged through Steward Feng. The killing aura was so intense that even an assassin couldn't necessarily give off killing aura like this. Who was this teenage girl exactly? Get the one in charge of the Murong mansion here or else there's going to be a bloodbath in Murong mansion, Yunwoo said casually. The guard, who had been standing at the gate with a saber all along, was transfixed with shock. Even Steward Feng and the young mistress were. Disbelief and horror pervaded those guards' eyes. Under Yunwoo's gaze, a guard hurriedly turned around, stumbled and rushed inside the mansion. He was so stiff that he moved like a machine. All those lookers-on who had been watching were standing transfixed with shock. Then they subconsciously backed off. Who's this teenage girl exactly? She's way too tough. Even the soul chain technique had failed to restrict her, then. Lu, look at young Mistress Murong. Why isn't she moving? Hearing the astonished exclamation and whispering of those lookers-on, Steward Feng stood up with the assistance of guards and hastily cast a look in Luo Shanshan's direction. Horror. Utmost horror surged through him. Her soul is chained. How's this possible? The young mistress was the one who performed the soul chain technique. How come she became the one whose soul is chained? At this very moment. Who's making all this noise in front of my house? A rather cold male voice came from the other side of the vermilion lacquered gate. Before long, a tall, straight figure slowly walked out. Dressed in a luxurious brocade robe and with piercing eyes, that man had an air of nobility and cold arrogance about him. In his early 30s, he didn't count as a very handsome man but was somewhat well-featured. After that man walked out of the mansion, those guards picked themselves up in a rather awkward manner. Together with Steward Feng, they respectfully bowed to and greeted that man, young master. Thousand Murong's eyes swept across them. The guard had already informed him of the situation outside the mansion in a flustered way, but when he caught sight of those cracks on the ground and the embarrassed look of Steward Feng as well as those guards, a look of coldness flashed across the bottom of his piercing eyes. What's this all about? A somewhat sepulchral voice was heard. And then Thousand Murong's eyes flashed in the direction of Yunwoo, who was dressed in gunny clothes. Suddenly, he was stunned. Seeing her beauty, he was fairly amazed, but the amazement in his eyes soon disappeared. Her apathetic purple eyes seemed bland and plain, but actually they were extremely dangerous. In addition, there was a barely detectable killing aura about her. She was the mysterious teenage girl whom the elder brother-in-law mentioned to me, and who's capable of performing soul chain technique. His suspicion was verified when he saw Luo Shanshan, whose eyes were vacant and wooden. Little girl, may I ask why did you come here and make such a scene in front of the Murong mansion after killing my elder brother? Thousand Murong's voice was fairly cold, but he sounded rather polite. But in the twinkling of an eye, he winked at the guards behind him and signaled them to bring Luo Shanshan in. Yunwoo didn't try to stop him. Gently stroking the handle of the whip with her white fingertips, she said in a bland voice, "Hand over the people I want. Otherwise, I'll do exactly what I've just said I would do." What did she say she would do? Right at the moment when Thousand Murong frowned, Steward Feng, who had retreated to the gate with the assistance of guards, whispered something into Thousand Murong's ears. Instantly, Thousand Murong's face darkened. "Little girl, you want to inflict a bloodbath on our Murong mansion? Don't you think those words were a little too big for you? Is that so?" Yunwoo coldly curved her lips. However, at this moment, she flipped that empty hand of hers and a flame popped out of her palm under the gaze of all people present. Those lookers-on abruptly widened their eyes. A flame? A tangible flame? How was it possible? Though warriors were capable of using elemental power, but it was impossible for them to manipulate real flame. Only summoners that had disappeared hundreds of years ago were capable of controlling tangible element. Was this teenage girl by any chance a summoner? This thought also flashed through Thousand Murong's mind, but he soon excluded this possibility. If this teenage girl was a summoner, by no means would he have heard nothing. He knew what the existence of a summoner meant. Little girl, I don't know how you learned to control flame, but if this is all you're capable of, then wasn't it too unreasonable of you to threaten to inflict a bloodbath on Murong Mansion? It was not until those lookers-on heard his remarks that they stopped speculating. Yet Yunwu apathetically raised her eyes, flipped the other palm, out of which another flame popped, and clasped her hands. With a wave of her hand, the contours of a fire dragon appeared out of thin air, giving off a potent chi. Its strength was actually the same as that of a Tier 9 peak stage magic beast. Roar, a deafening dragon roar, along with scorching heat, arose in the air. In the blink of an eye, before anybody could react, that fire dragon soared above the Murong Mansion, opened its mouth, and soon waves of furious fire were erupted downwards. In the blink of an eye, patches of houses were aflame and the fire quickly started spreading. Fire! People's yelling to the accompaniment of the sounds of beating drums and gongs instantly came from inside the mansion. A lot of guards and servants rushed over to help put out the fire, but when they saw the fire dragon coiling above the mansion, they all buckled at their knees. What was that? Outside the mansion. The look on the faces of Steward Feng and the others were alternating uneasily between various expressions. Thousand Murong looked at Yunwu with sepulchral eyes. You're refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. Abruptly, Tier 7 peak stage fighting spirit surged out of him, along with a burst of icy cold killing aura, and then with an uncanny swish of his figure, he thrust a sword at the target. On the sight of his weird and extremely fast attack, Yunwu lifted her eyebrows. Assassin skills? As if from her bones, killing aura abruptly surged out of her, her black hair started flying though there was no wind. This time, she fought back head-on. Surrounded by wind blades formed of wind element, the long whip corkscrewed squarely towards the sword coming at Yunwu. Thud! A ringing snap was heard. Thousand Murong watched the sword, the blade of which had been twisted, and the slits caused by wind blades on his arm, disbelief glinting in his eyes. Blood was oozing out of the wounds. If it weren't for that he was trying hard to subdue the pain, he might not be able to hold the broken sword in his hand. Wind blades. Wind element. She was actually double attributed. Like I said, if you hand over the two persons I want, there will be a bloodbath in Murong Mansion. As if having been amplified by a loudspeaker, her cold voice tinged with bloodthirstiness was heard loud and clear by everybody present, which made her sound as if she had total supremacy over her opponents. Thousand Murong's heart missed a beat, and with that he looked at Yunwu in utmost horror. You're double attributed. Double attributed? Hearing this, those lookers-on exclaimed in astonishment once again. Steward Feng also abruptly dilated his eyes and stared squarely at Yunwu. Everybody knew how rare double-attributed people were. In addition to the rarity, it was far more difficult for double-attributed people to cultivate. But surprisingly, this teenage girl not only had a double-attributed constitution but also reached early stage of Tier 7. Most people's endowments were even not good enough to enable them to reach Tier 7 in their 30s or 40s, not to mention at the age of 15 or 16. Was this teenage girl even a human? As the situation outside the mansion remained deadlocked, the fire inside was spreading quickly, and more than half of the houses had been burnt down in the blink of an eye. The largest luxurious mansion located in the middlemost area of the Luoyang city, where the eastern and western parts of the city met, was the main mansion of the Murong family as well as the dwelling of the Lord of Luoyang city. However, several months ago, the former Lord of the Luoyang city developed a rare disease and had been lying in bed since then. All residents knew about this. Many members of high status of the Murong family as well as its offshoot had left home to collect medicinal materials or seek prominent doctors. This day, several senior members who had just returned were sitting in the main living room of the Murong family. The atmosphere was solemn. Did you find it? Father's condition is getting worse. Mother asked us to figure something out quickly, said a middle-aged man in his early 40s. He was the third patriarch of the Murong family, Earth Murong. Originally, we've already found a vigor grass, but a man and a girl snatched it. Those bastards, with widened, angry eyes, Snow Murong smacked her palm onto the surface of a tea table and nearly knocked the cup off the table. Sky Murong, who was sitting on the opposite side, also had a sullen look on his face. After that Vigor Grass got snatched by that man and the girl that day, they had searched the Magic Beast's forest for another few days, but without luck, they hadn't found another one. Eventually they had had no choice but to return empty-handed. Although the Ouyang family had ended up just like them, they still felt very embarrassed on the thought of what had happened that day as well as that man and the girl who were uncannily powerful, so they were in a really bad mood. What happened? According to the information we got, Vigor Grass should grow right in the middle of the Magic Beast's forest. Did the Ouyang family beat you to it? Earth Murong asked with a frown. If they were members of the Ouyang family, things would have been a lot easier, but they were not, Sky Murong said, clenching his fists. Not them. Earth Murong was confused. Second elder brother, with your strength, who else are your matches except for members of the Ouyang family? Sky Murong's face went even more livid when he heard this question, a sense of humiliation surged through him. Third uncle, let me explain this to you. However, Snow Murong had just started speaking when a guard hastily rushed into the living room. Second Patriarch. Something bad happened. Your mansion caught fire. And then another guard ran inside, stumbling. He was panting heavily. Clearly he had run a long distance to get here. He was a guard of the mansion of the Murong family's offshoot, which was also Sky Murong's mansion. The latter guard brokenly reported in an urgent manner, Master, something bad happened. A teenage girl killed the young mistress's elder brother, injured Steward Feng and the guards and set a fire to the houses. She also said that she was going to massacre the Murong family. What? With a loud bang, Sky Murong smacked his hand on the table which instantly broke apart. Scared, the guard buckled at the knees and nearly knelt down to the ground. Sky Murong abruptly stood up from the chair, a murderous look in his eyes. I'd like to find out which bastard came here to court death and bluff massacring the Murong family. With an angry twitch of his hand, Sky Murong swished out of the living room, leaped upwards and shot in the direction of the East Avenue. Massacre the Murong family? I also wonder which snotty kid dares to be so wildly arrogant. Earth Murong also stood up from his seat, face full of sullenness. Soon, he also leaped upwards and flew away. What are you standing there for? Go tell my father to dispatch all the garrison there. She killed a member of the Murong family and dared to bluster. Whoever she is, by no means will she make it out of Luoyang City alive. Snow Murong had been simmering with anger, which made this incident a great opportunity for her to vent the anger. At the gateway of the mansion of the Murong family's offshoot, the situation remained deadlocked. There were still houses ablaze inside the mansion. People were doing whatever they could trying to put out the fire, but it seemed as if the fire had gone uncontrollable. Young master, the fire has spread to the west garden. Young master, the fire in the south garden is too fierce. We failed to save your favorite bird. Young master. Thousand Murong, who was standing in front of the vermilion lacquered gate, heard the urgent reports from those servants and guards, the look on his face growing more and more sepulchral. Hearing that his favorite bird had died in the fire, he felt a piercing pain, as if his heart was bleeding. In order to get that bird, he had gone through a lot of trouble and spent a large sum of money, but now it was roasted. Anger glinted in his piercing eyes, but the bleeding wound in his arm seemed to be reminding him that he would surely suffer if he fight with this teenage girl again. As a result, he was waiting for reinforcements. Yunwu knew clearly what Thousand Murong was up to, but she wanted exactly the same thing that he wanted. Waiting, she was also waiting. The arrival of the patriarch of the Murong family would be the beginning of the real show. Who's the one threatening to massacre the Murong family? Suddenly, an angry roar came from the distance, splitting the air. The potent chi of a Tier 9 early-stage warrior could be distinctly felt even if he was still a long distance away. The faces of those lookers-on suddenly changed as soon as they felt the heavy pressure. That's the second patriarch of the Murong family. A Tier 9 Kung Fu expert. Exclamation of amazement and scary rippled through the crowds. As if afraid of accidentally getting hurt, all lookers-on backed off in unison, raised their heads and looked in the direction of that figure flying nearer. Seeing that Sky Murong, who was dressed in a dark gray brocade robe, soon approached them from far away, all lookers-on were awed. But right after him, there was Earth Murong dressed in a purple brocade robe embroidered with a totem. His strength had reached peak stage of Tier 8, which meant that he was a powerful Kung Fu expert, too. Soon, two figures landed on the ground in front of the gate on which there was a long crack caused by the previous fighting. With this crack, the originally solemn and sumptuous gateway lost all its air of luxury. Sky Murong's face was terrifyingly sullen, and it went even more sepulchral when Sky Murong saw that more than half of the houses in his mansion had been burnt down. This scene was more than painful. "Chiener, how did you get hurt?" Earth Murong also had a gloomy look on his face when he landed, but with his sharp eyes, he noticed that Thousand Murong, who was standing before the gate, had a bleeding wound in his arm. Thousand Murong's face also looked sepulchral, but he still respectfully called, "Third uncle." Sky Murong raised his eyes to dart a glance at him, and with that his pupils contracted. "Chiener, you got hurt as well?" His son was in peak stage of Tier 7, yet he also got hurt. "Who is it? Since you were bold enough to bluff, now stop acting like a coward and show yourself." Sky Murong thundered. "Haven't I been standing here all along? Are you blind?" Yun Wu, who had been looking down, finally slowly raised her eyes and spoke in a cold, bland voice, as if she had almost fallen asleep due to the long wait for them. Sky Murong abruptly turned around and hurled a blast of potent Tier 9 power towards her. But the next second, when he saw Yun Wu's face, his pupils abruptly contracted, amazement glinting in his eyes. "It's you." Watching Sky Murong, Yun Wu slightly curved her lips, but there was a half-smile on her face. "It's been a couple of days, but Second Patriarch Murong's greeting style remains the same." Hearing this, those passers-by looked somewhat confused. It had been a couple of days. The two knew each other. After doing a double take when he heard her words, Sky Murong clenched his fists, feeling anger tinged with fear. He had experienced the eeriness of this teenage girl, not to mention that there she was with a man who was a grand kung fu master. Subconsciously, Sky Murong's eyes swept around her. "Second elder brother, you know her?" Earth Murong glimpsed at Yun Wu, who was in gunny clothes, and frowned. He couldn't identify her strength level. However, a teenage girl like her had actually managed to wound Sky Murong and kill the fat man at Tier 6? And she had also injured those guards. How was this possible? Earth Murong was rather skeptical. At this moment, before Sky Murong could reply. Move aside, move aside. Why are you all standing here? Clear off," an impatient female voice came from amid the crowd. Crowds of passers-by made way and Snow Murong quickly walked through them, followed by a couple of guards. Snow Murong had already had someone to dispatch the garrison, but she didn't wait for them to arrive. Instead, she led a couple of guards here first. She wanted to find out who was so bodacious as to challenge her family's authority. However, she hadn't expected that she would see the same girl that she had met in the Magic Beast's forest. "You?" Snow Murong's voice was rather brittle. Hearing this, Yun Wu slightly moved her head aside and blandly glanced at Snow Murong. After that she moved her eyes aside, as if she was totally uninterested in her. Embarrassment instantly appeared on Snow Murong's face. Having been simmering with anger all along, she went furious when she saw indifference on Yun Wu's face. She whipped out her sword and angrily pointed it at Yun Wu. "We didn't go after you, yet you came here yourself. Hand over the vigor grass. Otherwise I'll make sure you won't make it out of Luo City alive." The last time they had met, it had been in the Magic Beast's forest. But now, they were in the Luo city, which was the Murong family's domain. This time, she wanted to find out how arrogantly this girl dared to behave. She was determined to retaliate against Yunwu, by hook or by crook. Hearing this, Earth Murong abruptly frowned. Snow, are you saying that she was the one who snatched the vigor grass from you? Snow Murong's eyes were full of anger. Yes. There's something else, third uncle. In the Magic Beast's forest, she stealthily took the vigor grass while we were fighting with the Ouyang family. And she has a storage space. Snow Murong had added that last remark deliberately. Hearing her words, all lookers-on present couldn't help but letting out exclamation of amazement. A storage space? That kind of thing could barely be bought by money, yet this teenage girl actually owns such a precious item? Involuntarily, many people looked in the direction of Yunwu's hands in unison. In most cases, a storage space was attached to a ring or a bracelet, and sometimes a belt. But they found that Yunwu's hands were smooth, and that there was no storage space ring. Around her waist, there was a plain gunny belt. She didn't seem like someone who owned a storage space item at all. Had she by any chance hid it? Hearing her words, Earth Murong cast a gaze at Yunwu with a fever of greed in his eyes. Little girl, as long as you hand over the vigor grass and the storage space item, I promise you'll be able to leave here safely. Like attracts like. You guys from the Murong family not only do things in the same way but also talk in the same manner. Very interesting, Yunwu said blandly, but there was a trace of sarcasm in her tone. Earth Murong's face darkened. Little girl, take the opportunity when it arises. You killed a member of the Murong family and wounded our men. I offered to let you leave, so you should be. However, before Earth Murong could finish his sentence, a bloodthirsty look appeared on Yunwu's apathetic face, and with that she suddenly wielded her whip, which was like a python going out of its hole. There was a whoosh as the end of the whip shot towards Snow Murong, who was holding a sword. It was so fast that it seemed to be as quick as a lightning. Snow! Watch out! Thousand Murong hurriedly yelled. He was in peak stage of Tier 7, yet he still got hurt. Since Snow Murong was merely in peak stage of Tier 3, that whip blow would surely cut open her skin and tear her flesh, leaving her half dead. Humph! With her average skills. Snow Murong dodged aside and snorted dismissively. But her scornful words were still at her throat when Yunwu's whip took a turn, as if it had eyes, and tightly wrapped itself around Snow Murong's waist like a snake. And then the whip turned into a blur and threw Snow Murong squarely towards the stone lion in the distance. Snow! Sky Murong yelled, face tightened. With a potent outburst of fighting spirit, he flashed over and tried to catch Snow Murong. But the next second, Yunwu's lips curved up and a bloodthirsty, ferocious look flashed across her face. She instantly lifted Snow Murong up and dashed Snow Murong towards the ground. Thud, a muffled crash was heard, along with the faint sound of bones breaking. Ah! There was a long scream of pain. With her feet touching the ground first, Snow Murong violently impacted on the ground, making a deep dent. But Snow Murong just broke her legs and wasn't seriously injured. People could tell that Yunwu had been controlling which part of Snow Murong's body would land first. If she had landed on her head, then it would have been Snow Murong's neck that had been broken. Killing aura surged out of Earth Murong, who thundered, "You dare to hurt my niece right in front of me? I'll kill you. Third younger brother, don't be so impulsive." Sky Murong's face was livid with rage, but he hastily stopped his younger brother. That long whip was still around Snow Murong's waist. The teenage girl had launched her attack at such a weirdly fast speed that even he hadn't been able to react in time. If she had the intention to kill, then she could definitely take Snow Murong's life instantly. It seems that second patriarch Murong is a smart person. You know, the consequences of provoking me will be the broken neck of this Lady Murong. With a bloodthirsty, cold look in her purple eyes, Yunwoo looked at Sky Murong and the others with a faint, bland smile, but her tone was extremely callous. Face ghastly white, Snow Murong was aching all over. The sharp pain in her feet, in particular, was giving her cold sweat. For the first time, she distinctly felt the killing aura about Yunwoo. Watching Yunwoo, Snow Murong felt that her heart was shivering uncontrollably. Girl, Snow is the only daughter of the lord of this city. If she offended you, I hope you can forgive her. Would you please be so kind as to let her go first? Sky Murong said, trying hard to make his face seem as mild as possible. Hearing this, Yunwoo curved her lips in a sneer, why should I? The 3 words left the look on Sky Murong's face frozen. She actually needed another reason to let Snow Murong go apart from her identity of the Lord of Luoyang City's only daughter? Then think of it as doing me a favor. Would you please give the wrongdoer a way out? At this moment, a mild and somewhat dignified voice slowly came from the distance. Hearing this voice, all those lookers-on hurriedly stepped aside and made way for a middle-aged man who was leading a group of garrison soldiers towards the scene. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.